Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Mayor. There we go.
Well, I got 6 o'clock, so why don't we begin? The first thing on our workshop agenda this evening is the Dark Horse software that I've seen from time to time over the last year. And so we want to give some time, first of all, with Brad Larson to introduce us to the Dark Horse software and how it's been used in selecting a site for our Midvale 125 station. So, Chief, would you take it from here?
Sure, I'll just be brief. We've got Chief Don Burchett with us tonight. He's our assistant chief. He's been working really closely with the Dark Horse software program. This is a very powerful tool to help us plan for the future, plan locations of stations. It helps us with a lot of other data to help us improve our services to the citizens of your community. And Assistant Chief Burchett, as I said, has been working really hard on this. And I'm happy he's here tonight to present this to you. And I'll just turn the time over to him.
Welcome, Chief. Good to have you with us too.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all, Council, for giving me this opportunity to talk through this program and make you all feel comfortable with the location that we have chosen for the new station 125. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Let's see, does everybody have it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So like we have said, this is the Dark Horse software. It's an analytic tool that was built from our friends in Canada. We're one of the first stateside fire departments to use it in this capacity. So really where we came to land on this tool is we knew we had to build 5 to 7 fire stations, and we really in the past didn't have a good tool to identify where those stations should be. We didn't have any way to really verify that other than a little bit of planning data, a little bit of census data to go with. So this company has created this tool really as a analytic tool and also as a predictive tool for putting stations in the most optimal location possible. And I've shared this with Mayor Hale on a couple of occasions and also with Kane. So that was my dry run. So hopefully I can get it there again today. But I'll be brief in what I'm explaining, and then I'll get a little bit more detailed as we go on. So what we're looking at here is all obviously the Salt Lake Valley and then Utah County here in Eagle Mountain. This has all the fire stations identified, all of our stations, and then all of the mutual aid stations that we interact with. What we can do with this is look at our response type. So what I'm mostly concerned about is first due. So that means the first apparatus that shows up, whether that's an ambulance, a three-handed engine, a four-handed engine, it doesn't matter. It's the first person on scene is when the time stops. We can get into three-handed, four-handed, five-handed, or ERF. And ERF is a fire alarm assignment. So a first alarm assignment for a structure fire. And then a ERF 28 is a 2-alarm structure fire. So we can look at all of that data. This is our setup time. So what our setup time is our turnout time. So the amount of time from when the bell goes off to when our guys are actually pulling the parking brake and leaving the station. It also takes into account the call processing time at VEC. And we have targets here. The NFPA target is 140 seconds from call taking to en route time. So we can adjust those based on what we're looking at. The next here is the time period. So we can look at a 3-year time period, 2017 to 2019, or individual years. And this is historical data at this point. And then we can get into forecasting. So 2025, 2030, and 2050. These numbers really come into play when we're looking at where we're putting that new station. And I'll get into where we landed on these numbers here a little bit, if you bear with me. But the software developers got with all of the planning departments in our service area. They looked at census data from the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and they plug it into that using that information. So we have a pretty good idea in 2015 what we should anticipate for call volume and also density of calls in certain areas. That's not ideal, obviously. It's only as good as the data that they were able to collect. But what they do is they take the census data with the population and then they kind of spread it out based on where the growth is anticipated. They can't get too much in the details versus high density housing, low density housing, high income housing, low income housing. Those are all factors that we just have to kind of take with a grain of salt. We can look at daytime calls, so 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We can look at nighttime calls, or we can look at all calls. And then I'm also mostly looking at all emergent. So anytime the call response is a lights and sirens call is what we're looking at, but we can break it down further into fire alarm calls, fire emergent calls, or other. There's a couple things here with the map boundaries that we can look at the municipality specific, so Midvale specific, or we can look at station specific, battalion specific. We can really break that down too. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Hopefully this doesn't make you dizzy, but I'm going to zoom into Midvale. So this is current state Midvale looking at 2019 numbers. And this is the incident count. So emergent incident count. So Midvale had in 2019, just over 1,400 emergent calls. So anytime lights and sirens were needed, that's what they went to. You can see here is Midvale 126 and the current Midvale 125. We can look at the over goal incidents. So any of these darker colors are where we didn't meet our target with drive time and then that setup time that I mentioned earlier. Switching into this is drive time specific. So anything in green obviously is right around the station. We're able to get there in 4 minutes, which is the NFPA standard, or less in 90% of the calls is what we look at. The same with the 126 Midvale area. So combining the over goal plus the drive time gives us the performance. is what we really want to look at. So a quick snapshot of this is anything in green, yellow, and kind of orange. That's good. It's within our target. We can maybe do a couple things to increase our turnout time, but in general, we're within the target that we're trying to get to. Anything in darker red, those are opportunities to look for ways to fix those problems. So in this area in particular, let's say it's kind of right in between these two stations, so it takes a little bit more time to get there. So we know that's kind of a trouble area for us. And the same with down here. So I'll give it a quick opportunity to ask any questions or clarification before I move on to the new station. Any questions I can answer up to date so far? Okay. So next, what I'm going to look at here, this is the predictive piece of the software. So I told the developers that I was looking at building one new station in Midvale, leaving station 126. So where is the mathematically ideal location for that? And by doing that, looking in all the way into 2015 or 2050, excuse me, their mathematical formula puts the station right about here. So obviously we look at that and say, that's only one piece of the puzzle, right? This is an extremely well-developed area, and we can't just put a station anywhere we want. We can't put it on top of a target or where there's already a business. So looking at where we are is the old city hall, and that's in this tab here, is right here where that station is going to be. That's as darn close to mathematically optimal as we can get, thinking about those other factors that there's not land available there, or we'd have to build on top of I think there's an automotive shop there is what was the optimal spot. So really, what I'm saying is that the current station that we have, the location that we have rather, is as darn close as we can get, and I feel very comfortable with saying that using this software as the tool. So that's good news. There's a couple of spots in Harriman where we owned property, and the tool came back with a different location altogether. So with Midvale, thanks to Mayor Hale, we hit a home run with that spot. And so I think that was his doing in keeping the old city hall land and hoping that would be a fire station someday. So what I want to talk about here in 2050 is the amount of calls, the increase in calls that Midvale is going to see. In 2019, there was just over 1,400, like I said. In 2050, that number is anticipated to go up to 2,100, 2,167. So really what that looks like is these two stations are going to be overwhelmed with the current staffing. So what we can do here is look at adding a ladder company in that station, and that helps with our performance. It helps with the over goal incidents, and it really gives us the opportunity to decide, hey, are we building a small station or are we building a large station that can house multiple companies? And again, this is what I use to determine that building a large station here in Midvale would be applicable in this scenario, because I don't think in the next 3 to 5 years we'll need 2 companies out of this station, but you can see in 2050 that we will need multiple companies out of this house. So that'll allow us to run a company out of here, or maybe a company and an extra ambulance, and that'll allow us to run an ambulance, a truck, and an engine out of this station. That's what we're building the station to. The census data that we did get back from the Wasatch Front Regional Council was a lot of growth over here, a lot of high density housing, and then a lot of growth over here in high density housing. So I think we're on target with this station. I think that's all I have in my notes. Do you guys have any questions? I know that was quick and dirty. Ultimately, what I'm wanting to do is say that I didn't just think this was a good station. I used this really cool tool to help me get there, and brought in the other factors of where land was available, what we anticipate for the future growth, and all of that. So are there any questions I can answer?
What would happen if that land were not available, the old city hall? What would have been the best choice then? It looked like it was somewhere along 700 west at about 7200 south.
Yeah,
Right?
it was. Yeah, you're correct, Mayor. It was a little further north than where the station is now. So like what we're doing in Eagle Mountain, we're having to reach out to private landowners and make offers on land. And in the particular area that was optimal, that would basically be buying a existing building, tearing it down and rebuilding. So a major expense there that wouldn't really provide too much difference in the response. So we're lucky that we have it though.
Yeah, very fortunate for sure.
Yeah.
Council members, are there any questions for Chief Burchett? Very analytical process, and understanding the reasons that go into it makes it seem like the best decision, and it's hard to overcome that.
Yep. And Mayor, if I may, for 1 second, I
Take whatever time you need, Chief.
okay, great. So this is related to the new station, but slightly off track of Dark Horse. We mentioned it to Councilman Glover today in the board meeting, but we will be starting our communication plan for the residents and business owners near where the new station is going, just so we can inform them of what's going to happen and what we're planning on doing. We did the same plan and process up in Mill Creek just last month, and it was really beneficial to get out in front of the public comment meeting, which is coming up March 10th, I believe, for us. So we'll plan on in the next week or week and a half to start hitting the streets and passing out that information to make sure that all of the public is aware of what we're doing, and if they have questions, we can answer those directly. So like I said, in Mill Creek, it was really beneficial to get out in front of that and not surprise anybody. That's the last thing that we want to do there. And we were in Mill Creek, we were able to get one of the council members whose district that was to come with us door to door, and I'd like to offer that opportunity. I'm not sure whose district the new station will be in, but I'd be happy to. I'm sorry, who is it?
Yeah, that'd be mine if it's 7th West.
Okay. So I would be more than happy to communicate with you offline and let you know what our plan is. And, most of all, I want you to support it, obviously. And then if you're supportive enough that you can find some time in your day to go door to door with us, it's really beneficial.
Okay. And you said I could drive. You said I could drive the fire truck too, right?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
At least turn on the hose, shoot.
Yeah. It's really not that hard. You just drive fast. But Mayor, I just wanted to get that out in front of you so you know that process is happening. And like I said, we mentioned it to Councilman Glover this morning, but since you were not there, I wanted to get you that information.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you, Chief.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, and appreciate your time. And I'll be jumping off.
All right. So it looks like about March 10th, you'll start active distribution of information on what's happening there then.
Yeah, we're going to start before March 10th. I think our public comment for the Planning Commission is March 10th.
Okay.
So we'll start our process a little bit before that. Yep.
Okay. Very good. And thanks, Councilmember Gettle, for offering to help. Very, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Paul, thanks for filling in the meeting.
You're welcome. It was a good meeting this morning. They did approve the bonds. And as he said, March 10th goes before the Planning Commission. And I believe it comes before the City Council on April 6th, I believe it is. So, and then the outreach will start next week.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I got my second shot this morning and I think it went better than the first shot, but we'll see tonight and tomorrow morning when I get up how it's doing. All right, great. Next, we have a discussion on development fees. And Nate, walk us through the discussion and what we've got ahead of us here.
All right, thanks. Yeah, this is the wonderful world of development fees. So let me share my screen here. And so it scares me when I do this part. Okay, so this is going to be, I wanted to come to talk to council about development fees. And this is kind of going to be a two-part in one meeting. So I've divided it into two parts because I'm going to talk about two different fees. Sort of operating fees, as I'm calling them, and then new development fees and public infrastructure. So we'll start with part one. So these are operational community development fees. These are the fees that we charge currently for the community development services that we provide. So as you can see, these are building permit fees, business license fees, what we call community development fees, which is planning fees and engineering fees. And then also, you know, code enforcement is in there as well as road cut permits, right-of-way permits. I won't focus on these bottom three quite as much, but talk more about the building fees, the more community development type fees. They're all community development fees, I shouldn't say that. So these all are allowed in different elements or different parts of the state code on how a city can charge for development fees. I kind of had all that broken out in this presentation, and then I realized I needed to cut this down quite a bit and maybe be a little less technical. So each one has their own uniqueness to them, but in general, what the state allows a city or town to do, or a county, is to charge building permit fees, business license fees, planning and engineering fees in a way that covers the cost to the city of providing those services. And as I said, they're worded in different ways in the different code, but in a very simplified way. The code details that these fees have to be based on reasonable calculations of the cost to actually deliver the service. So if you're doing a business building permit, it's really covering the costs of doing the permits for the building, examining the building, making sure that it meets the code, building codes, all of the different codes that go with building permits. And it includes when you go through and calculate those costs, it's usually what you would call like a full laden cost. So it's the costs of cost to the city of providing those services. Building permit fees are really based on the International Building Code tables. And those are standards that are used throughout the state, throughout really the country. And in fact, the state of Utah uses those same building standards. So when we look at building permit fees, base them on those International Building Code tables, we're really in line with everybody. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get down through this. And then from those fees on the building permit fees, there's percentages of different elements of inspections what percentages those can be charged at. So with the other fees like business license fees and community planning fees and engineering fees, those again are based on what those costs are to the city. And as you can imagine, with different costs going up and down in the city, different staff, different levels of service, even though that level of service is relatively the same, those fees can change, or those costs on the city side can change occasionally. So one of my recommendations that I kind of put up here right up front is that Mid-Val City should review these fees every year as part of the budget process, which we do, and make sure that the fees are based on the proper costs. If we add more staff, if we add different departments that might have an impact on that, that may change the calculation of those. But then periodically, from time to time, the city really should hire a consultant to come in and look at the methodology that we're using, look at the calculations that we're using, and make sure that those compare well with what the state is saying we're allowed to do. So it's kind of a 5-year, every 5 years, every 7 years, you kind of check in and make sure the formulas that we're using still make sense. We're capturing the right costs, or we're not capturing costs that we shouldn't be capturing, just to make sure that those are in line. If you have a good fee study in place, you can update that with staff every few years or every year, but you kind of want to make sure it's in line and that it still makes sense. So the ones that I wanted to focus on were the ones here in red, building permit fees, business license, and then the community development fees. This is really partially coming out of me wanting to talk with council about fees to make sure that we're in line and that we're collecting the fees we should be. But also when Alex and I went through and did the single family zone discussions, did the survey, and then talked with each council member individually, fees actually came up as a way of not necessarily controlling development, but making sure we're, I guess, I'm not going to say taking advantage either, really, that we're capturing the costs that development is occurring in the community. So one of the reasons why at this point I've asked for funding in the budget to do a fee study is to have an outside consultant look at our fee structure right now, and just to make sure that we're in line with the state code, that we're capturing the fees correctly. So some of these are the current fees covering the full cost of the services? Have we added staff or added procedure in there that makes it so it costs more to the city? Are there services provided which aren't covered in the fee schedule? Like, for example, right now, you can get a plan review fee, but oftentimes we have developers coming back over and over and over, getting the planning department to review their application. And that's all covered in the initial cost, but the code does allow us to capture that cost for additional plan check fees. What you run into, not with every developer, but some developers, they're either trying to push the limits on what they can get developed, or they're maybe just not very good at understanding the code and understanding what to do. So they're basically, rather than presenting a good application, they're having our planning staff review their application over and over and over again until it's good, which is basically making our staff do their work for them. And if that's the case, we should be charging them for that service that we're providing. Then also to make sure that the methodologies and calculations are defensible. So in a lot of the state code, it says that if someone were to challenge the fees that that the city was charging, that they should be able to request a complete breakdown showing how their fee was calculated, what methodology that the city uses in calculating those fees, and that we could lay it all out to them. When you first do a fee study, that's really easy. When all of a sudden you've drifted 6 or 7 or 8 years away from it, you might still be following the right methodology, but it sometimes looks it sometimes can be more difficult to explain to someone, this is how we did it. Especially if whoever put it together did it 8 years ago and you never really knew why. So just to make sure that it's defensible if we were ever to challenge, and that it can be easily explained and updated. I think a good fee study staff can come in the next year and say, okay, we see everything that's being calculated in here. These numbers have changed. They cost more now, so we can update those, and then we can have accurate fees each year. I think that all makes pretty good sense. We did just go out and do some fee comparisons. So to make sure we're clear, and I've said this over and over, the fees are set on what it actually costs us to do it, not what other cities are charging to do it. They may have reasons why they're charging more than us, but we need to base it based on how much it costs us to do it. But we did go and look at some of the different cities on what we compare, how we compare. Almost all the cities that we looked at are using the International Building Schedule for their building permit fees. Several cities in Salt Lake Valley actually modify that. So they take the building code schedule and then they have a multiplier on there that they say, this is what inspections or permits cost. This is why they cost more in this city. And so they multiply a little multiplier on top of the IBC schedule. We don't do that. We just use the schedule. And then within the state code, there's several areas of like plan check fees and some other fees where they can be no more than 65% of the building permit fee as calculated. So they could be the cost that they can be the cost that it incurs to do that permit, but no more than 65% of the building fee cost. We're under that 65%. There's several cities in the valley that just say 65%. So they just set it at the maximum and say that's what they do. But through a fee study, we would check all of that and basically determine how much it's costing us to do that. Business licenses, the state specifies that there can be a whole list of different businesses that you have licensing for. They can all be determined based on how the cost associated with issuing those licenses. This is probably the most difficult one to compare across the valley because there's so many variables there from all the different business types. Some of them are much more, some of them are lower, some cities just don't either regulate that business or license it. But overall, when I look at the trend of the businesses that we selected, Midvale tends to be at the lower end of that scale. It isn't a bad thing, but it's something that I think as we do a business fee study, then we should know how much it costs us and where we want to be in that range. Planning and engineering. Planning, again, is really difficult because everybody has their own zoning and their own planning sort of theories that they have in place, and their fees are based on those. Again, with most of the communities we looked at, our fees tended to be on the lower side of that scale. There were times when we were a little bit higher, but times when we were lower. But that's an area that I really think we need to evaluate and get a true cost. So this is the end of part one. So I'm going to go through the recommendations here. So as part of the budget adjustment that we just did mid-year, then we council approved $20,000 for a community development fee study. We put together an RFP. We still have to review it a little bit through legal and through a couple of, I've got to review it a little bit more. But that would be for outside consultant to come in and kind of make sure we're in line, make any recommendations for fees we might be missing, and do all those things that I kind of just walked us through. I think in the end, not only will that make our fees as defensible as possible, but I think that it will make sure that we're collecting the right amount of revenue for the services that we're delivering to the community, to the development community. With this part and with part two, you figure out through the study what your maximum amount can be, and then it's always up to council to decide whether you charge that full maximum for those fees. Whatever you do, it has to be fair. You can't say you're going to pay the fee and you're not going to pay the fee. But you can say, rather than charging 100% of these development fees, we are only going to charge 70% of the development fees, and then apply that across the board. City council can also adopt a policy, and I'm working on a policy right now to do this, that allows you to waive fees for nonprofits and also for city projects that provide a public good. So if it makes sense to waive those fees because they're providing the service to the community, the code allows the council to do that. You really are supposed to adopt a policy on how that process works. So I'm working on that policy now. And then as you can imagine, lower development fees in a way can encourage development. But in evaluating the market and the current development environment right now, I don't believe that a reduction in fees is necessary to get development in Midvale or in the Salt Lake Valley. I think the development is coming along everywhere. So I'm not sure that we need to incentivize development here. And then the last thing is just continuing to evaluate and adjust development fees as needed ensures that development's paying their fair share. And as you know, if we're providing the same service level, but we're not charging the costs associated with it, then those costs are being passed on to somebody else. With community development fees, those are general fund fees, so that gets passed on to services we would normally use sales tax and property tax to do. So in the case of property tax, get passed on to the resident. In the case of sales tax, get passed on to the resident and those shopping in Midvale. So those are how that would work. So that's the end of part one. Is there any questions? This one was part one is pretty straightforward. You've already approved the budget for this. We're going to go out and do the study. But is there any questions here? Great. Before I go to part two, let me just show you. These are somewhat old, but these are some studies that were put together, Salt Lake County Municipal Development Report Card Study. So this one was done by the U of U Eccles School of Business. Has a report card basically that looks like this over here for every city. Midvale gets a B for developer relations, meaning we communicate with people trying to develop good. We're not trying to ignore them or make things more difficult for them. And then they rated on impact fees, so retail, office, and industrial impact fees. The city itself doesn't charge any impact fees, but like the fire district does. I think some of the sewer districts that overlap with Midvale do. So that's why we even show up on here. But out of the 14 cities they compared, we were the third lowest, which makes a whole lot of sense. And you can see the pros are low permit fees, especially retail. Again, this is coming from a developer's standpoint, not a resident or anything like that. But if you look over here on this report card, you kind of see the different fees. These are impact fees, and Midvale is right here, third from the top, because we have very low impact fees, especially compared to these other cities that they compared. This study is a much older study. It's from 2006. It's still from the same group, this National Association of Industrial and Office Properties. So very much from the development community. This one here, these ones I kind of like because it's permits and development fees. So it's not just impact fees, but it's our permit fees as well. This one is for industrial buildings. The one over here is for commercial buildings, but as you see, Midvale is at the very bottom. The lowest fees of anybody listed here. Again, this is 2006, but the one we just saw, we were in a similar position. This is very great if your primary goal is to encourage development in your community. And I know that in the past, then that has been a huge driver of Midvale. I think right now the Salt Lake Valley, including Midvale, is very, development is driving itself. And I don't need to know that cities need to encourage development to happen. We still like development and we like good development. So I would not recommend that we all of a sudden switch and we're at the highest point, but I think being somewhere down in the lower half, maybe upper part of the lower third is a good position where you're taking advantage of the fees that development would pay into the system, and you're still encouraging development, but you're not, you know, the rock bottom bargain city for development. But that's a council decision, not a my decision. But I wanted to show you those charts just to kind of see how we compare and how the development community views Midvale. So going into part 2, this is where it gets a little different. And this is impact fees. So currently the city does not charge impact fees. Like I said, the fire district charges impact fees. So developers are paying impact fees. They're just not paying impact fees to the city. Most of these quotes that I use in here come right from the state's website for the property owners or the property rights ombudsman. So they're definitions that I would hang my hat on pretty easily. And I think these, I've tried to keep it simple, but these are important. So an impact fee is a one-time charge imposed by local governments to mitigate the impacts on local infrastructure caused by new development. Growth in the form of new homes or businesses require expansion or enlargement of public facilities to maintain the same level and quality of public service for all residents of the community. Impact fees can help fund the expansion of public facilities necessary to accommodate new growth. So the key there and why I wanted to do that is impact fees are to mitigate growth so that you're maintaining the same level of service and quality to your citizens, your visitors, people who have offices here, basically the people who use Midvale. They're not to increase your service level. They're not to build new things that aren't needed. They're really to keep everything status quo. So impact fees are intended to help fund expansion of public facilities, including acquisition of property or water rights, materials, and construction. Impact fees cannot be used for routine maintenance of existing facilities or for employee salaries, meaning operations. You can't use impact fees or operations. You use it all for improvements to your system. I'll show you the different impact fees that you can charge. Before I get to that, I want to just talk about, this might not be the best picture. This picture really is showing, I think, pressure zones for water systems, but we'll ignore that and just say that this is a water system. And so I think the best way to look at impact fees, because there's a whole list of impact fees, and you have to think about them the right way. And I think the best way is to really look at a water system because we can kind of visualize a water system. So the water system is all of the elements of the water system that are providing water service across the entire city as part of your system. So that's going to include your pump stations, that's going to include your water sources, your pipes, your treatment plants, your storage facilities, anything that's part of that system, that's a cost that's part of that system for delivering water, is what the water system is. So if you then have a development come in and say, we're going to build a large group of homes, and they're going to have this amount of water demand, You're not saying, well, you're going to have to build the pipes under that and then dedicate to that to the city. That's just part of the development. What you're really doing with an impact fee is you're saying, what is that new development going to have? What impact is that going to have on our entire system? Do we have enough storage capacity to handle delivering water to them? Do we have big enough pipes to deliver water to them? Can we treat the water enough to deliver it to them? You might have a surplus of what you would call a surplus of capacity, not necessarily water capacity, but the ability to say, we're treating 30,000 residents, our system can treat 40,000 residents. So we have a 10,000 surplus in our system's ability to meet those needs. That all goes into this calculation. But if you then have a developer that comes in and says, I need to add 20,000 residential units or equivalents, then you say our system can't handle that. We're going to need to make improvements to our system so that they can handle that capacity. And that's what your impact fees are going to be paying for. So it might be paying for a water tank way up on a hill, or a treatment plant, or even having to go and buy more water rights from another water district in order to serve that. So you always have to think of it in this system-wide impact, not just what it's going to do right around where the development is. In a water system, that makes a lot of sense, but the same applies to any impact fee that you charge. So when you look at what the state allows impacts to be charged for, water systems and water rights, we just talked about that. Roads, so now you think about roads, and you don't think about roads just, are you going to impact the road that goes right out of your development to the next road? No, it's really your impact on the entire road system of the city. Are there things that bringing in 20,000 more cars are going to cause problems way far away from this development? All of that is part of improving the system to handle that. Sewer systems, the same as water, very similar. Water or sewer capacity, treatment, pipe sizes, things like that. Stormwater is very similar as well. Parks and open space is one where it starts to get into how do you think of that in the same way? But what you're really doing is you're saying we have a park system in our whole community on what level of park service we're providing to our individual resident. Every time we build new, you tear down 10 houses and you build 3 times that amount of residential, you're in effect lowering the amount of park amenities for every resident because you've added more residents in there. So the parks impact fee would be creating new parks or creating new level of service within your parks so that you're maintaining that same level of parks and open space and trail service. We don't have municipal power, but you could if that was one of them. The other one is public safety. And again, that's not officers or cars, that's really fire stations. So we just talked about where you're putting new fire stations. They are paying for those partially with impact fees. But I wanted to give you that sort of overview so that we're not thinking too micro when we're talking about impact fees. It's the citywide system that we're impacting. Is there any questions on that? Okay. So let me talk about what the impact fee process is. I always like to say that this is one of the most regulated processes in the state. Maybe alcohol beats it, but impact fees get a lot of attention. So really what you need to do, and I won't go through all of this in detail, but you really need to have an impact fee facilities plan. And for every impact fee that you're considering, you really need to go and say and thinking of it system-wide, you put out a notice and then you start preparing this facilities plan, hold public hearings, and then you make the plan available. I'll talk more about the plan on the next slide. There is a lot of noticing that goes into this. once you have a facilities plan and you go through the public process of noticing that, then you also provide intent that you're going to do an impact fee analysis. That's the fee section that goes with the facilities plan. And then there's a series of public hearings that you need to do to enact an impact fee, including public hearings. Very similar to doing the budget, but I would say that it actually has a longer time period than actually adopting the budget. One thing, I'll go into this a little bit more, but impact fees require you to collect the money into a separate account within your capital account. You deposit those fees into that. You actually calculate the interest on those fees separately, and then you put together a report annually that you give to the state auditor's office to make sure that you're monitoring, collecting, and using the fees appropriately. That sounds like a lot of work, but it's really not that hard of work. It's fairly easy. So one of the things that's required with impact fees is this capital facilities plan, analyzing the existing facilities that you have, the level of service that you're providing, along with any anticipated growth or demands that you see from new development, in order to adopt it. So, like I said, you have to identify the existing level of service, identify any excess capacity that exists that can accommodate the future growth, and then identify the plan, the demands that are being placed on those facilities, and what improvements you need to make to meet those higher demands. Again, this isn't maintenance at all. Maintenance all has to come through like a water fee. This is all for new capacity. And then you identify how the city will meet that growth. If it's water, you're going to have to build a new water tank, or you're going to have to build a new park. So you identify how you're going to do, what projects you're actually going to do to make the level of service the same. And then that's what you could base the impact fees on. Now, just because you might have other ways to add water or parks or anything like that, those additions to the system can count towards new impact fees. So if you're going to add 10 acres of park through a development, you might give a credit to that developer because they're actually providing the public parks, as opposed to you going out and having to build it. But you do get to count that new park as city park space, so that when everybody else pays an impact fee, you're maintaining that newer level as opposed to the level that you were at right before that. I'm not sure if that made sense, but let me explain that a little bit more. And then you can only use the fees to go towards those projects. When you do impact fees, there are exemptions. The state doesn't like to pay impact fees. School districts, you can and you can't, but they can ask for a waiver, and they could actually have impact fees. They could not do impact fees, which they all do. Low income housing can qualify to not have impact fees, charter schools. And then again, development activities with a broad public purpose. A lot of the times that is where the nonprofit category would fall into that. If there's a museum or something that's doing it, and it's basically a public amenity, you can, as a council, decide to waive those impact fees for those. You don't have to, but you can decide to. And then fees can only be spent on the systems that they've been identified, so they have to be identified in the fee facility plan. And then the fees have to be very separate. So as you can see, water and stormwater, public safety, those would all have their own, or at least stormwater, sewer, water would be their own enterprise funds. So those have to be kept in those enterprise funds and paid for those improvements. And then typically the other fees go into the capital fund. They never really go into the general fund because that's operating. but any fee that's collected has to be used or it has to be allocated towards a project within 6 years of the collection to fund the improvement project. And that's what you're reporting when you report to the state auditor. You're saying they do allow you to like save up for a water treatment plant. So you've identified you're going to build one in 10 years. They allow you to keep allocating that money towards that with the intention that you're going to build that water treatment plant. I've just got a few more slides here. I can go through these fairly quickly. When you look at the current level of service, again, it has to be associated with what you've collected it for. So roads got to go towards roads, parks towards parks. And then this is just me emphasizing this again, requires the growth has to go towards maintaining the same level and quality of public service for all the residents in the community. And then existing levels of service can be used to determine the amount of fees. A proposed level of service may be used to calculate an impact fee if the funding source comes from something other than the impact fee. So if you have a developer who's putting in parks, you can count those parks as that's your proposed level of service. I wanted to show these tiles up here. This isn't necessarily the way a parks impact fee would be calculated, because it would take into account the quality of the park as well and the amenities in the park. And you literally go in and count every bench, count every piece of playground equipment, and you determine what the level of your parks are in your city. But just from a square meters per person, Midvale's got about 9 per person. You can see Sandy is much higher, West Jordan, Murray, South Salt Lake is lower than Midvale, Mill Creek. So different levels of parks service per person, but that is one of the things that you kind of do is you say, this is how much park we actually provide for each one of our residents. So when you're setting an impact fee, then you have to say, we can't collect more than to continue to provide 9 square meters per person at this level of park. Now, if you then go and have a developer putting in more park, you can raise that level. And so there are ways that you could raise that, just not through impact fees. Impact fees are to mitigate the impact. This one is on roads. And so I just kind of wanted to show you here that while Midvale, compared to some of these larger cities that surround Midvale, have much less road miles and much less of a percentage share of all the roads in the county. But when you look at the road miles per square mile, we're right in line with the majority of the cities. So when you talk about what an impact fee would be for roadways, it would be similar to what these other cities are charging for roadway impact fees. And then roadway impact fees can include new road construction. So you're not rebuilding a current street, but if you're adding capacity to the street, if you're adding a lane to it, that could be covered with impact fees. Right-of-way acquisition, obviously important when you're expanding the capacity of a road. Facilities, so when you're talking about you can't maintain the road, but if you have a street plowing system and you've just added a whole lot more roads and you need to add more plows, the plows couldn't be covered by impact fees, the driver's wages couldn't be, but the facility that you need to house the equipment would expand, and you could cover that with impact fees. Any sort of traffic controls, and that means lights if you need additional turn signals, rights, lefts as intersections get bigger, that could all be covered within there, or any infrastructure that allows for an increased capacity of the streets. So the more people you bring in, the bigger the streets have to be. Doesn't have to be right outside of the development. It could be anywhere in the city that these could be applied for, where you're seeing problems. So the recommendation on this one's a little bit different, but these are kind of questions and recommendations. But I think the council should consider evaluating the impact of development on city infrastructure systems. I think that the city, the costs for the, skip that one for a second. Let's go down to the second bullet point. I put those in the wrong order. I think that Midvale should know what the cost and the impact of a new development is creating for the city infrastructure. Like I said before, you get to decide as a council whether you charge that full amount or none of it. It could be 0 or it could be 100% of the impact. That's completely up to you. But I think as a council, and trying to be in the best interest of your citizens and developers and everyone, you should know what that number is. You should have a good idea and understand what development is, how development is impacting your infrastructure. The only way to really do that is to go through the impact fee process, evaluate those systems, figure out what your needs are. Those are things that we always want to do anyways. So we want to have a parks master plan. We want to have a streets master plan. We're doing all of this with the water right now. But I think it's important for city council to do that. Typically, you do an impact fee study every 5 years to 7 years, just to make sure that you're in line, and the development community actually wants you to do them more frequently because they want to make sure they're actually paying what they should be paying. One of the tricky things here is the costs for a facility plan and the impact fee study are allowable costs within the impact fees. So usually you're not worried about how do you pay for these studies because the impact fees themselves are paying for them. That presents a little bit of a problem in Midvale where we don't collect any impact fees, so you don't have that built-in funding source for them. I'll look further at if we could potentially do a study and then have that paid for by impact fees, because you can run deficits with impact fees. You can do a building and then have impact fees reimburse the cost of that. The obvious problem with that is if the council decides not to do impact fees, then you still don't have a funding source to pay for this. So this is the same thing down here. Just the city can decide how much or how little they want, how much or the process of waiving impact fees for a public good. The council can decide that through a policy. Again, lower development fees encourage development, but my thought is that in our current environment, that's not needed. And even though it's a highly regulated fee, it is a fee that the state legislature, who I think is a very pro-development legislature, allows cities to continue to charge this fee, meaning that that they recognize that there's costs associated with cities' infrastructure that needs to be paid for, and development should be paying its share of this. The majority of the cities and towns in the state do have impact fees. Depends, some of them have different special service districts that charge impact fees. And a lot of them are in, UPD and Unified Fire, so they charge their own impact fees. I kind of wanted to run through and give you that high-level lesson on how we calculate our development fees and impact fees, and then just kind of see what questions you have, and then also how you feel about moving forward with both of these.
Okay, so what input would you like to give Nate on these development fees?
Nate, as I understand it, there's not much we can do now except proceed with the fee study and see what that comes back recommending to us. And, I think then we would have more conversation at that point. I don't have any recommendations other than to proceed with the $20,000 fee study.
So with that, that's what I want to do, is just go forward with the $20,000 fee study for our current development fees. The impact fees is a bigger question. Right now, the city doesn't do that. Is city council interested in looking at what our impact fees would be and then evaluating whether we should charge them?
I see. So you want input on part 1 and part 2, but mostly part 2.
Mostly part 2.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with moving forward with that. I don't want to be at the top of the scale, but I don't think we should be 0 either. So I'd be for developing some sort of impact fee in Midvale.
I agree
Nate?
with Councilmember Gettle.
Nate, what kind of cost would this study cost?
They cost different amounts, and you can do them all together as one big impact fee study, or you can break them up and do them individually. Ones like parks are pretty easy to go through and just count up what those assets and those acres are, so those are easy. Streets get a little trickier because you're typically having an engineering group come in and evaluate your streets, give them a rating, and then, to some extent, and I'm not saying that they completely do a streets master plan, but you get pretty close to doing a streets master plan on where do you need to improve your streets. So you're going to look and say, we have certain intersections that are D's and F's on the grading scale. Those need to be improved. Impact fees can go towards those. These are what our plans are. Those are going to cost $8 million, and that's going to give you X amount of capacity. So therefore, this development should pay a small percentage of that cost, and that's kind of how they do. But the engineering studies, can cost, up in the $50,000-$60,000 range. The fee section is really easy. I mean, that's basically just taking those costs, dividing them up by the amount of development that you expect, and you get those numbers pretty easily. But there is some cost in those. The ones that I would be looking at doing would really be the parks and the streets, because I think those are where our costs are going to hit us, and those are ones that, in a sense, hit the general fund. I mean, it's general fund revenue that we transfer over to the capital fund to pay for that. And so those are the ones that I would want to do. And I know Glenn is already doing fee studies on the water side that I believe would cover the impact fee part. So, and then, like I said, I think that there's a way that we can reimburse ourselves for these studies from impact fees were we to put impact fees into place.
Well, I'm okay with it, but I really want to know how much it's going to cost before we actually do this.
Well, I could go and get quotes too. I mean, I've done these before. That's the range that I've seen. Is street ones are in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. Parks are usually in the $10,000 to $20,000 range. And then water is a whole nother ballgame, but I'm not talking about water.
So I know that when we bonded, we had all our streets graded. Was that a study, or did we just do that on our own?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I would have to have.
I believe the streets were rated on condition and not capacity, if that makes sense.
Okay. That's correct, yeah.
And then I just wanted to point out, just due to the amount of these studies, they would need to come back they'll be included in the budget process. As Nate says, they can get quite expensive, and then there's only a couple of firms that will actually do the calculations. So while the calculations are complex, it could still cost $5,000-$10,000 a study to have them do the actual calculations.
Yeah, and I'm not asking you now to fund the studies. I'm asking if you want us to pursue looking at these and getting it. If you said we've never done impact fees before and we never want to do impact fees, then I would know, okay, we don't want to do that. If it sounds like it's something that you want to do, which I've heard a couple of council members say, yeah, this seems like something we should do, we'll go out and we'll try to figure out how much these costs are, and then we'll come up with a plan through the budget process on how we go about doing that. Does that make sense?
This is Bryant. I'm one of the ones that has brought up the impact fees. I mean, from my understanding, once the, new development over by Zion's Bank goes in and we have all those homes, the police are going to need a lot more resources. That was regardless if we stayed with UPD or not. And which means it's going to probably make taxes go up quite a bit. We've already missed sort of the impact fees for one of the biggest developments in the state, which is unfortunate. Because I'm guessing we're going to have a tax burden coming up that we don't want to talk about at the moment. But yeah, I think it's important to try to look into, because I see the damage it could do to a lot of citizens already.
Okay. Well, that sounds to me like I'm on the right path, and I'll keep going down that path, and then I'll bring these things back to you, and I'll work with Kyle and Matt and Glenn to make sure that we have a good plan going forward. But those are the questions that I wanted to answer, where I wanted answers to. Any other questions?
Yeah, sorry, Nate. Will you send me this PowerPoint? It was awesome. I've been looking for a way to explain this to my staff, and I have not done very well. This will help.
Sure, of course. And I have done several rounds of impact fees before. They're not the funnest thing in the world, but they are good, and you can get good numbers from them, and and justify what you're asking the developers to pay for. Great. Well, that's the end. That's all I wanted to go through. Thanks for your time.
All right. Well, thank you, Nate, on leading us through that extended discussion. Really helps clarify where we are, where others are, and where we need to be thinking about. So appreciate that.
Sure.
All right. Let's, can you turn your screen off there now, Nate? Thank you. Okay, I want to welcome everybody to this Midvale City Council meeting on February 16th, 2021. This is going to be an electronic city council meeting without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207 as amended by House Bill 5002. I, Mayor Robert Hale, as chair of the Midvale City Council, make the determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase. As restrictions take place across the state for limiting public gatherings, the city wants to make sure everyone interested in participating in city council meetings can do so. The meeting will be broadcast on a YouTube link. And if you would like to provide public comments, please email your comments to Laura Magnus at lmagNESS@midvale.com prior to the completion of the public comments portion of the meeting. You may also submit comments if the mayor and city council open a specific agenda item to public comment. And these comments will be read aloud in the meeting and will be part of the public record. Okay, so let's have a roll call, Rory, and get this meeting underway.
Okay. Councilmember Sperry,
Here.
Gettle,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Robinson,
Here.
and Glover.
Here.
All right, thank you. We'll now turn our time to the Unified Police Department. Am I missing the Pledge of Allegiance? I did, I'm sorry. Well, Unified Police Chief, let's have your, oh, you got it already. All right, let's all stand and pledge allegiance to the flag, and then we'll proceed with the agenda. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, now Chief Thomas, we'll hear your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. It's good to see you all. Just have a few comments tonight. I'll be brief with my comments. I hope you all got our January report. I met with City Manager Kane Loader earlier today, and unfortunately, our statistics that I reported at our last were preliminary as far as our case numbers, and we're at an all-time low. However, when the actual ComStat report, which is what we base each and every month's final tally on, they're right where they should be, right square in the middle, kind of where we can almost predict them at 845. So good and bad news. It's nice to be able to predict trends and not see those anomalies in our case work. So also along with that and with the stats, as you can see, the citation count was 725 citations that were issued. Speaking about citations, today was our first, what I'd call over an inch of snow within the tolerance of our winter parking ordinance that was established last year. And our day shift sergeant went out and today gave 121 warning citations in a small part of the city. And that's what was my direction, was to kind of saturate one section of the city and really get the education point out there. That being said, we've already had the complaints, and I won't necessarily call it complaints, but people that have contacted us and have, told us that they were promised that they could park on the street by different people, anything from landlords to just people unnamed within the city. But I think it's a solid ordinance. I'm hoping, and I haven't talked with Glenn yet, but I think it gives opportunity to use these streets as parking when it's not a true winter storm cycle like we've pretty much seen this year. Now, that being said, today was a day when I'm sure those plows were out and doing their business. And so I'm anxious to hear if it was effective from Glenn's drivers. I will say that the stealth, I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
Chief, I was just jumping in. I think you got the count wrong because we got 124 calls, not 122.
Well,
no, we did get a few phone calls, but that's a good thing that you're out there helping us out. So
great. And I hope, like I said, my intent was really to get the education out there. And sometimes that stings up front because people are used to perhaps what they heard or rumor and not necessarily what our ordinance is based upon. So we'll continue to do that to a point. Every one of these citations that was issued was a warning, to my understanding, and we will record all those in our record management system. So if they continue to get those, they will not be warnings. They will be actual penalty citations in the future. I was amazed at how much a social media post on our stealth stat box that we have had for many, many years, although the news is reporting it's brand new. As you're well aware, we had, I believe, Channel 13 as well as Channel 5 come out and do live media. I was a little hesitant to even tell them where the box is at in hopes that it didn't get stolen or vandalized, especially by some of the comments that were on social media. But once the rumors went away from it being, one gentleman said it can see through walls without warrants, and I think he was being humorous. But it really is a great tool for us. And the difference is if we go and post a police car on a residential roadway to try to either monitor traffic or get an idea how the traffic is, it's a big billboard and it says, slow down, the police are down the street. excuse me, the same thing with our speed trailers that we put out. They warn you and they don't give true stats. What I found with these stat boxes is they really do give us stats. No one knows they're there typically. And they give us good accurate, not only what time of day, but if there is truly a speeding problem, if it's a certain time of day, we can be very efficient with our resources and deploy them at that time of day and make a difference. So we will continue to use that. Every time that box is out, we keep track of the stats. I saw later in the social media post that we're almost got a fan club down there on Grant Street and Monroe. Everyone wants it now. So it will make the rounds. It's going to stay out consistently. And I'm actually considering buying a second box just to assist us throughout the city. UPD board is this Thursday at 9 a.m. Obviously Mayor Hale will be there, I believe. Just giving you a heads up, that is available to listen to it's actually very easy to listen to if you have the opportunity on the YouTube link that goes out. So I just wanted to put that word out there. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., I will be sitting in on the district attorney's screening of the Winco shooting that we had a few months back. That was a very labor-intensive investigation, although initially, and I haven't heard the finality of how that investigation's come out, so I'll be able to brief some of the council after the fact on that as to if there's anything out of the ordinary that needs to be said. I did just within the last week, I ordered what's considered it's called a chest seal. And we've had several, we actually had two in a row. If you'll remember, our detective Chelsea Winslow was involved in a officer critical incident just down across from CHG. The day before that, there was officer involved shooting up in Holiday City. In both those cases, I was able to watch our officers who have some tactical field training and medic experience apply chest seals. And that's for any time there's a trauma to the chest cavity. And that can be, and I'm sure Chief Larson can agree with this, that can be a life-saving, quick, critical patch so that, we perhaps can sustain life. So I bought those to supplement each and every one of our patrol officers. The cost of those are anywhere from $15 to $21 a piece. And so when you got to get those on board to every one of our officers, it can be a little expensive, but it's well worth the price, either for, civilian suspect or God forbid, any of our officers, we can at least have that opportunity to help them with life-saving efforts. Kane Loader mentioned last week when we met that CHG has seen a little bit of a nighttime problem with transient traffic down around their parking garages, probably due to the fact of they haven't been used a whole lot and sometimes have been coned off. So I did deploy our officers down there. Sergeant Grant Richardson last week had an emergency appendicitis or appendix taken out. So he's been out for a week. Today was his first day back. I've asked him to make contact with the CHG representative and see if they've had any continued problems with that. But that was one of those issues that we had not seen or heard about. But once we did, we've just put it out to our officers to kind of keep an eye out, and it seems they've done so. Mayor, I wish you luck with your second vaccination. I can honestly say that 12 hours after I got mine, I felt pretty, it shuffled my deck, we'll put it that way, probably for a good 24 hours. And that was very consistent across the board with all our officers and even our civilian staff that got it. I've heard very few people where it really didn't just knock them down for a day. That being said, our staff here, our officers, even our office staff, I think two or three out of the entire bunch that got the second vaccination actually took some time off. They just toughed it out, came to work, took a couple Advil and just made it to their regular days off. And, honestly, after 48 hours, you feel great. So I just wanted to mention that. And last but not least, mention that retired officer Hugh Bennett, that was he actually started with me back in the day, a few moons ago. He retired from the sheriff's office in UPD and actually went on to do security for the federal courthouse. He was a victim of COVID and passed away this last week. Hugh was about, I don't know his exact age, but people would tell me 52 years old, very fit, good man, no other existing conditions. So, you know, it's just a crazy disease that strikes, and I don't think there's really a set pattern on it. So, you know, we're all taking our kind of universal precautions, using our social distancing as much as possible. But I just want to say on behalf of myself and my staff that Hugh's a good man and we're going to miss him. So that's all I have tonight. Any questions or comments for me?
Hey, Chief, on those speed boxes, when you get the reports, is it possible that you could give it to whose district it is and let us know what those stats are so we can respond to our citizens?
Absolutely. I generally will give those to Kane, the mayor, and then forward that as kind of, that way they can form directly to you, and there's a good chain of custody on those. We did pull the Carlson was where that a lot of this media hit, and we pulled the box, and we've actually got the battery recharging right now, and we're going to run it for another week. So after that, I will definitely get that report back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, quick question. What area was it that you did the most enforcement of today for the snow emergency? I could probably guess, but just
it was, I didn't get a brief from the sergeant, but my observations was west of State Street and pretty heavily all the way down to the river bottoms. I heard some of the officers talking about it, but even this morning coming in, a lot of cars just parked and covered with snow. You know, Grant, Lincoln, Jefferson, everything. So we look forward to more saturation. But if we redo an area, what we're hopeful for is people will start getting the word, and we don't have to keep doing this quite as much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes
Not an outlier, but this shot was easier on me than the first one, at least so far. My shoulders are not sore. We'll see what tomorrow morning looks like, but so far so good.
I wish you luck.
Of course, I went out, shoveled 3 inches of snow off of my sidewalk and driveway when things kind of calmed down about 2 o'clock. Maybe that helped. I don't know. But
yeah,
it's going well so far.
All right. Thank you, Council, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Larson, Unified Fire Department, what you got?
Well, Mayor, I don't want to be negative or give you any fear about tomorrow, but Chief Thomas said it shuffled his deck. I think it took any brass right out of me that I had about 24 hours after I got the second one.
Okay.
Also, hopefully you'll skate through. Just keep some Tylenol in hand and a lot of blankets. It comes or leaves as quick as it comes. So.
Okay. Appreciate the heads up.
In fact, related to COVID, I think it was November, we had an average of about 4.5 a day off for COVID leave. And so far in November, we've only had 2.3 off per day. And that is mostly due to this reaction to the second shot. So we're happy in that regard that the infectious numbers are down. And after everybody gets through their second vaccination, I think we're going to be hopefully close back to normal. I believe the number I heard today was about 500 of our staff, our employees have received the vaccination, with about 430, I think, receiving their second so far. So we're looking good for those numbers. We've been able to staff all of our stations through this entire process, the COVID pandemic. We only had to do 8 mandatory callbacks last month. That means that we had vacant spots that we didn't have volunteers to fill, so we actually called some individuals and asked them to come back. So that's good, only 8 mandatories. So that number's going down too. So we've been able to continue to staff the stations and provide the service to the citizens that they expect, which we're really happy to hear about. I did want to report, I got an email from Chief Ascardi I didn't get the notice on this, and I'm hoping, Mayor, that you and Kane did. Yesterday at the 15th at about 1 o'clock in the morning, we responded to a working attic fire at 8163 South Ivy Drive in Midvale. Okay, good. Medic Ambulance 125, the station right there by City Hall, was the first arriving unit. They had heavy smoke showing from the attic. With assistance of our neighboring fire departments, West Jordan and Sandy, they made a very aggressive interior offensive fire suppression operation. It means they went after the fire pretty quick. All residents self-evacuated prior to arrival, and tremendous efforts were made by the crews to salvage the belongings inside the home, which is really important to us, and even more so to the family members, I'm sure. So while the suppression efforts were going on, they were making these really great salvage efforts to save the interior belongings. UPD was really instrumental in traffic control points, which allowed the firefighters to perform their necessary duties and keep them out of danger. The interior of the home was preserved from the active fire, with the majority of the damage being held to the attic. That's really significant because attic fires are probably one of the toughest ones to battle. Just really difficult. And that was from Chief Lee Ascardi, your Seapatoon Battalion Chief. Sent that to me, so I wanted to pass that along. I believe that's all I have to share tonight. Are there any questions for me?
I want to thank the Section 125 for their quick response, Chief.
I certainly will.
Any questions or comments for Chief Larson? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'll now move to public comments. Any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for a public hearing on the agenda may submit their comments via email to Laura Magnus, that's LMAGNESS @midvale.com, prior to the completion of this portion of the meeting. Items brought forward to the attention of the City Council will be turned over to staff to provide a response outside of the City Council meeting. So let me ask, Laura, have you received any public comments?
Yes, Mayor. I have one public comment tonight, and I'll read it to you now. My name is Amber Hendricks. I am Midvale resident at 281 East, 7800 South. I and my neighbors, we have become increasingly frustrated with privacy, noise, and traffic issues along 7800 South due to Mid-Valley Elementary School's new building. We have reached out to Canyon School District administrators, the Midvale Police Department, and most recently to Heidi Robinson to resolve these issues. The privacy, noise, and traffic issues began to be significant in 2018 when the Canyon School District began to rebuild the Mid-Valley Elementary School. The negative impact on the neighbors along the east side property line has been significant. Canyon's district administrators agreed to specific items. The east side neighbors has confirmed Canyon School District has informed Canyon School District of our concerns, including lack of privacy, loud noise before 7 a.m., and significant traffic issues. They agreed to 1, lock said gate to ensure safety and privacy to these neighbors. 2, to rework the lighting along the building and the overflow parking lot. 3, to rebuild my retaining wall due to change of grade. 4, to work with us to agree to plans that would provide privacy to the neighbors. They have not followed through with these agreements. We have privacy and noise and safety issues. Pickups and deliveries to the school regularly occurred as early as 3:30 a.m. The east side gate has not been locked in the evening or weekends. The entire school lights are left on throughout the night. Traffic along 7800 South is significant. I respectfully request that Canyon School District 1 receive citations for violating the noise ordinances and deliveries before 7 a.m. 2, the gate be locked every evening and on the weekends. And 3, the lights of the building turned down each night. And that is the only public comment I have this evening, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll now move on to council reports and begin with Councilmember Quinn Sperry.
I don't have anything tonight, Your Honor, or Mayor.
Okay.
I almost called you Your Honor there. I'm still at work.
I hear that once in a while, but I take no offense.
Yep.
Okay, we'll now go to Councilmember Dustin Gettle.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief Larson said it best a couple weeks ago when he said, I want to be brief no matter how long it takes. Similar to that, there's an old French proverb that says, trying to remember back to my French class, something along the lines of, I've made my comments tonight longer than usual because I didn't have time to make them shorter. So with that said, I sent around an email today to Lisa and Garrett and some of the other council members just to see if anyone was on board. I think, you know, we had a national impeachment trial and our senators here in Utah were featured heavily in that impeachment drama. So what I wanted to do is actually send a letter of praise or commendation, not condemnation, commendation to Senator Mitt Romney for his vote and his role in the impeachment trial. If nothing else moved you, or I'm not speaking to anyone in particular, but if nothing else moved anyone among this group, it was that Mitt Romney seemed to be, well, he was caught up in, you saw the security footage of him being ushered away from, you know, what likely would have been harm. And of course, we can't say that for sure. But so I do think in this political climate, and we are politicians, as we, you know, none of us will admit that, myself included, but we are, and it's been a very interesting time to be in the public life as we are. And I think in this political climate of just criticizing everyone, no matter, you know, I think we should pick some instances where we can praise our elected officials. And as I mentioned to Lisa and Garrett today, you know, 2012, me being in Pennsylvania, the last thing I thought I would be pressing for a commendation of Senator Mitt Romney. He was never, when I was on the East Coast, Mitt Romney was not someone who I agreed with politically. And I still have some differences with him. But however, I do think his actions in showing courage in knowing for sure that his vote was going to cause unrest amongst politicos in Utah and across the country. He did it anyway. And I think we would be remiss as a council to not thank him for showing the courage in doing so. So I wanted to bring back a resolution next council meeting, which will be March 2nd, and hopefully have some debate on that. You know, I think we've had some issues in the past with some resolutions. I just want to say, you know, just because I bring a resolution or want to bring a resolution like this that delves into the body politic doesn't mean you have to vote yes on it. You know, it can be 3-2 or 4-1 or, 1-5, 1-4, I might be the only one. But, sometimes these moments in history, I think it's nice to be more of an active participant in it than, not saying something when we have the ability and voice to say so. And Lisa, did you have anything to add? I saw you popped on the camera. I didn't know if anything I sent you was. So we'll just have.
I have nothing to add. Sorry.
That's okay. When you pop up, I think you have something to say. So if it's okay, I talked to Councilmember Brown. He was on board. Councilmember Robinson was on board. At the very least, getting the resolution on the agenda for our next council meeting. I did reach out to Representative Andrew Stoddard, Senator Kathleen Reeby. They were both very appreciative of such a resolution and offered their, I guess, friend of the council support for the resolution as well. I reached out to Representative Eliasson, haven't heard back from him just yet, but I'm hoping to have his approval, which would officially make it bipartisan approval for that resolution. So anyway, that would be for our next council meeting. And in the meantime, if you, mayor or fellow council members, have any input, you can always reach out to me. I'd be happy to take your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bryant Brown, please.
Yeah, I just have a few things. Dustin sent me his proposal, and I had made a few changes to it, but otherwise, I think it's a good thing. And in a world where everyone wants to submit negative resolutions lately, it seems like on the news on both sides, you hear about a lot of city councils and stuff making negative responses to their elected officials, and this worded right could be very positive, and I appreciate Dustin's effort on that. My next part, I had a couple citizens reach out to me yesterday and Sunday about the light on Holden and Center Street. If you're traveling east to west, and so I drove there last night to see it, or the night before because it was snowing last night, I think. If you're driving east to west on Center Street, the Holden light will around, I don't know how late this starts, but it'll be green, then it'll go yellow, red, green, to the point where you don't even have to slow down. But the north to south traffic will get a green light for literally a half a second. And so if you're traveling that north to south, and you go to enter this intersection, you wouldn't even have time to transfer your foot on the pedal, but that east to west traffic will just keep flowing. And so I was talking to one of the people that lived in one of those big gray houses, and they said that there's been several accidents that have woken them up at night. And he thinks it's tied to this really weird timing of the light, where there is no north to south. A lot of times there isn't anyone in the north to south lanes. So it seems like there's like a bug in the system. So I don't know if we can get someone to look at that, but it was really wonky. I mean, it instantly changes. I don't know who to talk to about that. I'm guessing that's something like we don't do this. Does the city control the lights at all, Matt or Kane, or can we pass that information along? What do we do when there's something like that?
We'll work through Keith to get it retimed.
Yeah,
it's actually Salt Lake County signal maintenance that does that. Yeah, and I think we could have Keith or Glenn call them and talk to them. I've noticed that light malfunctions occasionally myself. It doesn't really malfunction. It just gives you a red, and then it goes right back to a green arrow.
Yeah.
And there's also something wrong with the light. I noticed down at the intersection of Bingham Junction and 78, where the left turn, eastbound left turn, has priority over everything else when it shouldn't. That should be tripped with the sensor, and it's not working right.
Yeah, and
we'll have them check that out.
Great, thanks. And the other one's tied to traffic as well. A few of our speed signs don't have the speed limit sign underneath them, which I didn't notice. but one of them's like if you're coming down from Macy's and you're coming down the hill, I'm pretty sure that one doesn't. And you don't know if it's 30 or 35, and all of a sudden it just tells you you're driving too fast. Where some of the speed signs that flash, it has the speed limit sign underneath it, right? I think the 1000th East one doesn't have the sign underneath it. So I was driving, I was thinking it was 35. It's telling me I'm going too fast, so I just kept slowing down until it said 30. So, and then there was a speed limit 30 sign like 200 yards past the sensor. So we should put the actual speed limit on those signs. Obviously in a neighborhood or something, it's usually, we all grew up knowing 25, right? So the Princeton one, that one's self-explanatory. That's the one I see the most. But these few other ones people were pointing out don't have the speed limit sign underneath, and you don't know since 30, 35, 25, 40, like no one knows what they're supposed to be traveling. So if we can add those to the budget and the next go around, doesn't have to be put up tomorrow, but it's definitely something we should look at just so people know what they're supposed to be traveling.
Yeah, we'll remedy that. That's a fairly inexpensive fix, so we'll get on that right away.
Thanks, Glenn.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Heidi Robinson, please.
Thanks, Mayor. First off, I just wanted to thank Chief Thomas and the staff over at UPD and Public Works for trying to help alleviate some of the traffic issues that are happening at Mid-Valley Elementary. I know that it's been an ongoing issue, and hopefully we can find something that can help in the smallest bit. But also I wanted to know, with the garbage and the deliveries happening before 6 a.m., do we have a contact there to find out how we can maybe find a better time slot for them to do that, so the neighbors aren't being woken up at all hours of the night?
That's in violation of the county noise ordinance. So we'll get on the school district about that. They shouldn't be operating that early in the morning.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's the county health department that governs that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you please let me know if I can do anything to help?
We will do that. Yes.
Perfect. That's all I have tonight. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And finally, Councilmember Paul Glover.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to thank the police department and the fire department for all they're doing. I know I continue to get comments on speeders throughout the city, so that's not getting anything. I know we're trying to accomplish that, but we really need to come up with some brilliant ideas of how we're going to stop all of this, because it's just getting worse, I think. But I do appreciate everything that's being done. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you very much. My report is brief also tonight. I want to lay out there for all of our citizens that are 65 and older, including those that may be in the 70s range that are getting shots for COVID vaccination now. The age limit will drop to 65 on March 1st. And so please watch for instructions on signing up. There is a huge number of people in that age group, and the county will be devising a fair and equitable and reasonable system for signing up for vaccination shots. So watch for it, and that will start here in just a couple of weeks. So that's all I had tonight. Let's go to the city manager report. Kane Loader.
Thanks, Mayor. About the only thing that I have is just let the council know and the mayor know that there's a winter storm advisory out. They're expecting quite a bit of snow through tonight into tomorrow. A lot of the agencies are closing their buildings down or delaying their openings. UDOT's requesting that we keep as much traffic off the road as possible. off the road as possible today through tomorrow afternoon. We're going to be working with our staff. We're going to telecommute as much as possible. We'll make a decision on what to do with City Hall. Public Works is probably going to be, they're going to be out fighting or plowing snow and doing their normal utility rounds and things like that. But there again, I think we'll work on maybe an abbreviated crew there, just so he's got some resources if this thing continues on for a while. But I wanted to let the City Council know that storm advisory has just come out, and I was made aware of it by our emergency manager a few minutes ago. So we'll be working, and Matt and I and the department directors will be talking together to make decisions on what we'll do tomorrow. But it looks like we're going to do either a delayed opening or not open City Hall tomorrow with the snow emergency. The other thing is the state legislature is halfway through. We've got a lot of legislation, a lot of bills that we're watching. Some of them are, my thoughts are there doesn't seem to be as many bills that we're dealing with that we're concerned about, but the ones we are dealing with are worse than ever when it comes to taking the authority away from local officials to do your job. And I don't know if you get a chance, Cameron Deal was on a program over the weekend. If you get on the league's website, you can watch that program. I think it was on Channel 4, where he talked about what we're dealing with up there this year, and it all goes back to local control, local authority. We're going to be calling on you as elected officials to call our legislators when some of these bills get to the House floor and the Senate floor, and start to put some pressure on our elected officials, our legislators, to at least be answerable to the cities on how they vote. A couple of the bills in specifics are, there's a couple of billboard bills that really take away the authority, local control, local authority away. There's the bill on accessory dwelling units. They're modifying that. We're seeing, I think it's the third substitute of that bill is out now, and we're looking at that. They have made some changes to the bill, but it's still not exactly where we as cities would like to see it. And we've got several other bills that we're watching very closely. But there will come a time in the next couple of weeks we'll be calling on you to, because frankly, you have more clout than we do up there with elected officials at the state legislature. So, Matt, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Kane or Matt, are any of our state legislators, the ones who represent any part of Midvale, on board with? I wouldn't imagine, with the exception of maybe Chris Jansen, that they would be supporting this, at least the billboard bills.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they all want to see some moderate and affordable housing legislation in some form, but I think our for the most part, the legislators that represent Midvale City are very cognizant of the fact that they are stepping on your toes and your authority. And so I haven't had any of them in support of some of these bills that are very abrasive to us. So I think our delegation, for the most part, in Midvale, we're on solid ground. It's the rest of the state that we got to worry about.
Which makes it hard for us to put pressure on people, because my go-tos are Stoddard and Reeve, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't have any clout with Beaver, Utah, or Eaton, or those types of places.
Well, I think it's a concerted effort. When you get 249 cities and towns, I can't remember what the count is, over 1,000 elected officials calling the state legislators. That makes a difference. So that's the army that the league can put to these against some of this legislation, and that's what we need to do.
If nothing else, it's going to be interesting to see if the league can amass that army to defeat, what seems to be momentum, at least to pass the billboard bills. So it will be interesting. I'm hoping that, Utah League definitely can flex its muscle.
Hey, and I have a pretty good relationship with Senator Collimore, who's my senator. I can contact him.
I think that would be good, Quinn. That would be, he'd be a good one to call. Senator Reeby is right in step with us on most of the issues that I know of. And that may be, frankly, where we have the biggest chance to stop some of this is in the Senate. They are more, for lack of a better word, they're more of a stable bunch. And they have a lot more experience there. And I think they have a better understanding of what legislation does to cities. The problem with the House is they get such a turnover in representatives that they really don't understand that, and they haven't established a relationship with their local officials, their local city leaders, to know what it really does. And so it becomes difficult in the House to do anything. But we'll keep you informed, and I may be calling on you to help us. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Kane. We'll now have a department report on the community redevelopment and RDA. Begin with Nate Rockwood.
Okay. I'll try to be brief. We've already spoken for 50 minutes, which is, I'm sure, way longer than anyone has ever heard me speak. Two items. One of them, I just wanted to give you a quick update on business licenses. We do continue to get business license renewals. It was going to be interesting for me to see how business licenses did throughout the pandemic. And happily, it looks like, this doesn't say how businesses are doing, but at least they're renewing their business licenses, meaning they're still businesses, which is a positive in this environment. But we do have more active business licenses today than we did 9 months ago. So we continue to see renewals and new business licenses coming on, at least more than are disappearing. The second item I wanted to talk to you about is just an update on the single family zone discussions that we had before, and putting the moratorium in place. So the moratorium on the MPD, the multifamily MPD within single family zones, expired. However, we have begun the process of, first of all, putting in new standards in place, but more importantly, recommending to repeal that language that was put on the moratorium while the council and the planning commission work through the details of the new proposed code language. And so the planning commission approved sending that recommendation to the city council last week to repeal that section of the code. That will come to the city council the 2nd of March, so your next council meeting. I believe that's the next council meeting. The planning commission also had a long discussion about the proposed new language for development in those single family zones. And that discussion, Alex will bring that back to city council to have a discussion on that on the 16th of next month. the Planning Commission is asked to have another work session on that to discuss some details more on that. So that'll happen in April and May. And then that'll continue to come back to council for discussion. So we want as much discussion on that as possible so that you can understand all elements of the proposed new code, make any changes that you want, and then hopefully move to adopt that in either May or June. But in the meantime, with that repeal in place, that will keep any of that development that we were, or that the council was not wanting to see from not happening, while at the same time we're diligently working through what we do want to see happen. And so I just wanted to outline that timeline for you, let you know that we are working on that. Planning Commission has heard it. They liked a lot of elements of it, and we'll keep working on that, moving towards an adoption. So that's all I have, if there's any questions. Great, thanks.
Thank you, Nate. We'll now go to, oh shoot, lost my agenda. Hold on. Okay, we'll now go to Administrative Services Report. Kyle Maurer.
Thank you, Mayor. I will also try to keep my presentation brief tonight. I just have some short updates on my departments. The first in the Justice Court, as Chief Thomas has mentioned, the past few council meetings, we have seen an increase in citations. This chart in the upper right is the number of, should be cases, not claims. It was my typo, I didn't catch. But as you can see, from when the pandemic started in March, April, we have been seeing a steady increase in just cases in the court. In fact, it's about a 94% increase from July of 2020, which was our low point. This chart over on the lower left-hand side shows our revenue year over year. So it does show we are below the prior year, which is understandable given the fewer cases. And then, of course, there are some limited functions in the court right now that they aren't able to do. And then this bottom chart does show cases filed December of 2020 versus December 19. In information technology, one of the big projects they just completed was they did update our document management system to the latest version. One of the things that our citizens will see more of is we will now be able to update some of our user forms that they use, such as our building permit form, new service request form. So they'll have a better look and feel. It'll be more like a PDF instead of the format of the document management system. So the first form they will actually do for us, and of course our IT staff will train on how to do those forms moving forward. But we're going to start with the building permit application since that seems to be a very complex form. So we're going to work on making that a little easier. On our system needs assessment project, our consultant has issued a request for information draft summary. So they go through and summarize what requests for information we receive from software vendors. And they do also give some cost ranges on possible replacement software. So the next step is they will finalize that memo and then they'll draft action plan report. So that will be the final phase for the consultant and they will give their recommendations at that point. A couple other projects, and these are actually tied to our document management system since they'll tie in with that. The first is automating our plea and abeyance form and process. So they've done the major programming of it. And so the Justice Court will start testing that at the end of February. And then another project is automating our grandma redaction process. They've completed the scope of work on that. And then the consultant is lining up staff on their side to start working on that. So we've got a lot of projects in IT moving along, which is great. In utility billing, as part of our evaluation of our current processes, which has been good, our city treasurer has looked at our disconnection processes in any ways that we can make them more user-friendly. As I've mentioned before, the last thing we want to do in utility billing is disconnect a customer for non-payment. It's certainly something we don't enjoy, and I definitely know our customers don't enjoy. So one of the things we've done is we are now doing door tags for those customers that have received a disconnect notice but haven't made payment on that disconnect notice. So we do hang a door tag now, and then we will usually give them 48 hours or more to pay depending on when those door tags are hung. Of note, so in January, we did only disconnect 3 accounts with this new process in place. And I want to caution, we most likely won't be just disconnecting 3 moving forward, but it did show we did see a dramatic decrease by hanging those tags. So we were able to get people either paid or on payment arrangements. So we had a lot of happy customers that we started doing those tags. And I think it's also good for our finance staff, since those days with the disconnections can definitely be emotionally tough on them. Some other things, we are continuing to work on this policy and procedures document. Our city treasurer has completed a draft of it. The next step is we are circulating it through our finance staff to get their input, since they're the ones that are on the phones and they are working with the customers the most. So they see a lot more questions than like myself or our city treasurer might. We're also working on some infrequent situations that come up and working through those to get a good policy in place to recommend moving forward. We're also looking at possible different bill payment portal options, just seeing what options are out there and trying to get some rough ideas for cost. The next step would be issuing a request for a proposal if it looks like this is something that's financially feasible. The next slide is our utility billing dashboard for January. So we did see an increase in the number of accounts we've billed, and a lot of this is just due to new growth, new accounts. Of note is our estimated reads, which is this upper right-hand corner chart. We did decrease the number of estimated reads. So in November, we had 425 estimated. We were able to reduce that to 319. Some of that, the majority of that, is due to continuing to do change outs. We're still finalizing the meter change out program that we started back in July. We've also been doing better at finding those accounts that have gone bad quicker. So our meter technician's done a great job on that. And then our reasons for estimate, this bottom chart. So the majority are still meters that we've identified as potentially failing. As I had mentioned before, we have some register ranges that we know are prone to fail, and we have those in the meter change out program. That's the majority of our estimates that are occurring. So we're working on getting that number down. And of course, in July, with council funding, we will do the 3rd year of the meter change out program. In finance, I did send out a monthly budget versus actual report on the 8th. My goal is to get those reports sent out quicker after month end. We're doing some internal processes where we're doing more of the reconciliations on a weekly basis instead of waiting for the month to occur and then doing them, to hopefully provide a more consistent schedule on when we're getting those out. We are continuing to do department meetings with all of the departments. The departments have been great to work with, as always. We are doing interviews for the assistant finance director this week. And then finance staff, particularly myself and the city treasurer, we're doing preparation for next year's budget. And I did send out a appointment for the budget retreat, but just as a reminder, it's April 15th from 9 to 2, and I'll be providing more information in the upcoming weeks. So that's all I had tonight. Are there any questions or comments?
Kyle, did you say you are currently interviewing for the assistant finance director position, or you're just starting that process now?
We are starting, so our interviews are tomorrow.
Okay. And can you just say, like, just generally speaking, how the applicant pool was for that?
It was leaner than I was expecting, so we are interviewing 4 candidates. One of the things that happened was a lot of governmental jobs came open the same week our job posted, so I think that may have diluted the pool a little bit, but looking at the applications, I think we have some good candidates.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Good report. The next part of our agenda is a public hearing to consider a preliminary subdivision plat for a 4-lot subdivision located at 287 to 293 East, 6790 South. Jason Binks is going to present that, but I'd like a motion first of all to go into a public hearing.
I move that we go into a public hearing.
Second.
A motion and a second to begin our public hearing. Any comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of going into a public hearing, would you say aye?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are now in a public hearing, and let's see, am I supposed to read anything on that? No. We're in a public hearing. So, Jason, would you lead us through this, please? Consideration.
Yes, sir. Good evening. I think everyone can see my screen. I'm one of two people here and still in City Hall watching some of the puddles freeze over, I believe. So we're here tonight to look at the preliminary subdivision 287, 293 East, 6790 South. The applicant is Brandon Fry of Fry Developments. This particular subdivision was noticed to 41 property owners within 300 feet. And this was part of a conditional use for some twin homes that was approved by Planning Commission on January 13th. So we're here to look at the preliminary subdivision map. There's a vicinity map. It's the corner of 300 East, or the northwest corner of 300 East and 6790 South. It's currently 2 lots, and what the proposal is to split that into 4 lots and then put 2 twin homes on that property there at the corner. It's currently undeveloped and has been undeveloped for quite some time. While we have this map here, all the properties around this proposal are single family with duplex overlay. And if you look just across the street to the south, there is a twin home there. So this is kind of in keeping with the neighborhood character. Here's a street view looking northwest, currently undeveloped. You'll see that the sidewalk, curb and gutter have never been built there along 6790. Part of this proposal is to finish that. These twin homes will be accessed by a shared drive along that unfinished area that you see right there. There's some overhead power lines that will remain, but the utilities to the twin homes will be buried. And that curb, gutter, and sidewalk will be extended along 6790 South. Here's actual subdivision plat. You'll see that there are going to be 4 lots, 2 structures. So right now it's about, those 2 lots are about 0.42 acres. And when they subdivide them into 4 lots, there'll be different sizes, 0.7 to 0.14 acres. And the reason that is because along the 2 roads are front yard setbacks. So it kind of is in keeping with the rest of the homes on the blocks. But because we have those large front yard setbacks, you're going to end up with different size lots there. 2 buildings then, 4 units. These are all going to be single story. The 2 structures are basically mirror images of each other. The shared drive there in the middle, and then I'll show you some floor plans here shortly. Right now, this proposal and what was approved on January 13th does meet Title 17 and Title 16 requirements for subdivisions. This is kind of a rudimentary site plan of what's already been approved, but it kind of shows you in one glance what it's going to look like. 2 mirror image structures with the driveway coming up from 6790 South, and then landscape front yards both on 300 East and 6790 South. This subdivision has already been approved by, or the preliminary proposal has already been approved by Fire, Engineering, and Public Works. Quick look at the floor plans of what's been approved. There's going to be a basement for each structure, and then a 3-bedroom home, 2-car garage, and a covered patio. We think that this proposal meets the general plan requirements for housing diversity in this area. We think the twin homes provides a price point for a wider range of home buyers. Here's the elevations. Again, these are 2 mirror image structures. So what you're seeing is accurate for both structures. The top elevation is what faces the driveway, so kind of inward. And then what on the bottom elevation is what is going to be facing 300 East and then west. The first proposal had no doors here, but in keeping with some neighborhood compatibility, we believe that some door, some kind of entryway makes it look more presentable, aesthetically pleasing for what a twin home could be along a frontage. Here's the side elevations then. Again, along the frontages, we wanted some doors, even though you can see those elevations that are facing the driveway. We think that a door along the frontage gives that more kind of the welcoming look. So with that then, these are the same conditions of approval that were proposed at the Planning Commission. The applicant has already satisfied some of these, and these are very standard for a subdivision like this. To prepare a final subdivision, notes that what is proposed will be built so that there's no changes, street trees to be noted on the plat, duty to serve letters, and then evidence that courtesy notices have been sent to these, and they already have, and I've received them. So with that, the recommended motion is that you approve this preliminary plat. And before I turn it over for public comments, I'd just like to summarize some of the issues that I received prior to the Planning Commission. I've received some additional ones that Laura will read here shortly. But just to summarize, we did have quite a response for this. And most of the comments were against the development, and they fell into 2 broad categories. The first category that was that 4 units is a little bit too high a density for this lot. They thought the twin homes kind of was not in keeping with the neighborhood, even though it meets all Title 16 and Title 17 requirements. It's single story. It does have the required garage parking. And then the second part of, or the second broad category of issues that we received was that this will increase traffic, and that 6790 already has quite a high volume of traffic. And the 2 comments that the 3 comments that we've received since then kind of extend those same kinds of areas. So with that, I believe that Mr. Fry, yes, Mr. Fry is in attendance tonight, so he's here. That's the end of the presentation.
Just a question. On your narrow side view, you show windows up above, but you say it's a 1-story. Are there attic bedrooms up there, or just aesthetics?
I think this is aesthetics, but I'll let Brandon Fry, the developer, answer that.
Yeah, those are full windows just to bring an aesthetic appeal to it, because that you've got that long gable that goes across the entire width. So to kind of break up that monotonous look, we felt like it was appropriate to add an aesthetic feature there.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So there's not going to be any heads poking out of those windows?
No, there shouldn't be, no. Maybe Halloween, I don't know.
Halloween, that'd be great.
Yeah, I
right?
was gonna say, maybe Halloween.
So the only parking is in the garage? Is that it?
Yeah, they're both built with 2-car garages.
So we're just assuming that they don't want people to come over, like, ever. I'm trying to understand, like, how this is, like a normal house or 2 twin homes or whatever, at least have a driveway that if someone were to come visit, they could at least park there. So I want to make sure I understand that there's literally, unless you give someone your garage code or go open your garage, they're going to be parking on 2 very busy streets like that. That you think the best thing for this community is to force traffic onto the road or not have people visit these people. Like, I just want to make sure that that's understood. Like 300 East would be terrible to park.
I can answer as far as the code. The code requires at least two parking spaces. So if this was a normal home, yes, they provide those by the 2 garage parking units. Now, we all know that people store in those
Well, and even if they use it for personal use, that there's a big difference between 2 spots on a driveway versus 2
Right.
spots in a garage, and that definitely need to update the code, because if developers are going to come and do this to our city, we should definitely fix it, because this is baloney. I think
Right.
it's absolutely garbage.
The ordinance that we're working on does address parking and parking percentages, and they're a lot more prescriptive in that change, and that's why we're doing the changes. We run into this issue with the neighbors identifying the parking. So as far as the code note right now, this does meet that requirement. Brandon?
I mean, yeah, the twin home at the end of my street has 9 cars between the 2. So, I mean, good luck with that in that neighborhood. That's what's going to happen there. So we're going to park at 67 and 300 East. That's just what happens.
I'm not as familiar with the ordinance, Jason. I mean, there's always an opportunity. We have that 30-foot setback on the side yards on 6790. We could certainly add a parking, an additional parking space off 6790 if that's acceptable to the city. I don't know the ordinance well enough to say whether that's acceptable or not.
Right. I've posted the signs for this particular item, and I noticed all along 6790 there is parking, and then 300 East as well. But parking and traffic is certainly something that the neighbors have responded to.
My question, there is parking available on 6790 and 300 East, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that problem's solved. If there are parking spaces available.
So in the wintertime, Dustin, where were they parked?
Well, I'm just saying, if
well, no, that's a legitimate question. If you think it's solved, it's actually against ordinance.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
So it's
true,
not
but that's true everywhere. As the chief was saying today that he got complaints today, but you're allowed to drive 65 miles per hour on the highway, but if a police car comes by, you have to get over. So our snow ordinance, yeah, you can park there, but when it snows, you got to move. So anyway, that's a different topic. But as long as we, the city, have parking spaces that we have determined are available on those 2 streets, then
But we don't. But that's not how parking on a public street works. It's just a public street. It's not like here's a designated parking spot.
Well, I mean, if it was dangerous to the point, I mean, we could say no parking if it was dangerous in these areas, but have we determined that it's not? Sounds like people just don't want you to park here because parking is limited, and that's a legitimate concern. But we do have a code that states how many parking spaces they need, and they're complying with these plans. The broader question is about the parking on the other streets, but that, I don't know, that doesn't seem to be relevant to the site plan.
Brandon, correct me, but I think this driveway is 20 feet wide, and the driveway doesn't stop right at the garage, it may not be optimal, but with the 20-foot wide driveway, I think if one of the residents did have a party or a gathering and there was additional cars, I think you could probably fit some to the north in that part. Not that they would, but there is more concrete available than just to the driveways. And then there's 26 feet between the two structures, and then some more behind the sidewalk. So
Yeah, if you notice on that site plan, the driveway, like you're saying, Jason, runs past the garage to the north about 22 feet. So if there was, it could easily accommodate two vehicles at the very end, let's call it of the lane there, of the driveway lane.
That extends past, I see that. You make those designated spots, or is there a reason they extend that far?
Well, one was aesthetics and two was parking availability.
So they won't be at least blocked off from parking.
That's correct. No.
Like in some, communities, they won't allow it if it's not designated.
No, correct.
Interesting.
Brandon, you made a comment about potentially putting some parking in. Can you tell me where that was again? Was it coming off of?
So off of 6790, yeah, on the south side off 6790. I don't know how the ordinance reads. We could certainly add another parking, just as a designated parking stall for each. For each building. Probably wouldn't be able to do two. But again, that's consideration. You'd have an approach coming off of 6790. You'd have three approaches coming off 6790.
the code would certainly allow a little bit of bump out there, interior to the sidewalk. So if Brandon maybe wanted to add some extra concrete there, that would be an ideal place to park additional.
Just to go back, so my original intent with that drive, the existing driveway going past the units or past the garage openings, was to accommodate two extra vehicles. It's a 3-bedroom, they're 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes, more geared toward a single family use, a young couple maybe with a child or two. But again, when visitors or guests come, to have, at least a minimum of 2 extra parking spaces there.
I mean, I would like that, even if, I'm not saying you have to designate a parking stall for each unit. I think it'd also be nice if it was just open, and then that way if somebody's having guests over, there's 4 extra stalls that they could be using. I'd be in favor of that.
According to this picture, if you look at the top elevation, the concrete actually goes all the way out to the end of the house, maybe just a little bit beyond. So that's what you're looking at here, this area here.
Okay, any other comments from council?
Yeah, just for Jason again. I mean, I know the answer to these questions, but I just want to put them on the record for people listening. I mean, all of this, it's the current zoning, correct?
Correct.
And then I know people are probably not happy with having those 4 homes on that lot. The zoning, this particular zone with single family and a duplex overlay, do you know how long that's been in place?
I believe it's been in place since 2002, which is why we've taken the opportunity with such recent pushback from residents to redo the subdivision ordinance. Yeah, it's been a generation since we've updated it. So what Nate has talked about a couple of times tonight will be a lot more restrictive or prescriptive with parking or something like this. But right now, Councilman Sperry, yes, 2 required per residential unit. This plan does meet that.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to just make a comment. I agree with the parking. I think we need to do something, especially to be able to make sure that there is parking other than just the inside garages. But I do like the fact that they're single story and not double story there. which would really make it look a lot odder to have two-story buildings with all of the single-family homes all the way around it. So that part I do like. And if we could get any more parking in there at all, it'd be great.
Yeah, my issue is only related to parking. I don't think that's two twin homes. I don't know if that's a density, you know, your corner there, they're building those 3-story townhomes. That's a pretty dense area. That's not too far from here, right? That 7,230 story.
Yeah, right.
This is fine in density. I just thought, you know, not having any parking is not what we want, you know.
Yeah, and the reason for my question on the zoning was just so that people who are listening understand, it's been zoned for a long time. We didn't just change the zoning recently to allow something like this. So, I mean, that lot's been vacant. I mean, this is not far from where I grew up. So I saw that every day going to and from school as I walked. So, I mean, it's been there as long as I can remember. I mean, there's nothing built. So I wondered for many years what would go on there. And I mean, now we know.
We have some aerial photography from, I think, 83 that it's not developed since then. So maybe in the 40s, but who's here to say when they were a kid?
I do have a question. Is the parking concern, because every picture that I've seen of this intersection and driving over there yesterday, there is no parking on 3rd or 6790 other than the homes that have driveways, people park in them. But I've yet to see a car parked on either of those streets. Now, granted, you'll probably get someone who will park, you know, people will probably park on the sidewalk until they're told
Right.
they can't do that. We see that in our city and other places. In West Jordan, you see people parked up on the curb all the time, or the sidewalk, I should say. So, I mean, we can prevent people from parking illegally is my point. I would like to see with the overall design of the houses, I know a lot of these types of duplexes will have the 2-car garages and you know, we can't regulate someone. A lot of times what happens is people use their garage for storage. That's, I mean, just generally that's what happens. And then they park wherever. In this particular project, it looks like they're not going to be able to do that. There's just no parking that I can see on 3rd or 6790 that is, I mean, it's going to be illegal. So if someone wants to do it, you know, unfortunately, you just have to call the police if they're parked there. And just, I mean, I would assume there's no parking on either street. Is that correct?
Right, but there is, and I assume that's where people would park for any kind of gathering. With 4 units sharing this driveway, I would assume that there's going to be some kind of self-regulation. If I can't get out from that rear unit, I'm going to tell my neighbor to park inside. So,
and I couldn't really see with the renderings, but so there's not a driveway that you could pull the car in, like as you see on all of the, if you drive down the street, like all of the single family homes have a driveway that you can pull into. These structures aren't going to have that.
right, this is a shared driveway.
The only idea of that is that the north side of the structures. So basically it'd be in front of the 2 north front porches.
My wife and I moved in, we were first married just a block and a half from this. And that lot, I think Marilyn is in the house just to the west of it. And her family's owned those 2 lots forever, as far as I know. It's always been vacant. All right, any other comments from council?
One more question, sorry. I recall there was some dissension among the Planning and Zoning Commission on this one. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, once they realized that this was a conditional use and it met all those requirements, it was a unanimous vote to approve. They did talk about the traffic. The city engineer, I talked to the city engineer about the traffic. They recently installed an LED stop sign light, so it flashes. And there are speed humps along that whole road, but the residents say that it really hasn't deterred what they're seeing. But no, there wasn't dissension among the commissioners.
Okay.
Justin, this is on the same intersection where traveling eastbound from State Street, you've had people, who were under the influence of blown through that stop sign, and a car had actually ended up in one of the homes in the living room. And
Right. The home at the very end of that T, on the west side of that T intersection.
Right. It's had, I think cars have hit the home or now the cement pillars they put out front at least 2, if not 3 times.
Yikes.
Okay, well, this is the portion of the agenda that allows any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, or issues. If any of the public would like to comment on this item, you'll be allotted time at this time. If you have not already emailed your comments to Laura Magnus, please do so before we close this. When commenting, please limit your comments to 400 words, which is the equivalent of about 3 minutes. Include your first and last name, include your city of residence, and include the name of the agenda item. And city staff will only read into the record the equivalent of 3 minutes or about 400 words. So be concise with your statement. So let me ask now if there is any public comments on this item. Now, Laura?
Yes, Mayor, I do have some public comments on this item. The first public comment is from Emily Andrus, and she lives at 284 East, 6790 South. There is not parking on 300 East. There is very limited space. Please add extra concrete on that driveway entrance for extra parking on 6790 South, or limit it to a single twin home facing the street. Thank you, Emily. The next public comment is from Simon Xiong. I have concerns on the preliminary subdivision request 22-19-328-072 and 073 at 287 East, 6790 South, Midvale. The subdivision plan does not have enough spaces for car parking and spaces for kids to play. I'm quite sure that the future residents will park their cars along the roadsides as it is inconvenient or difficult for them to park their cars in the garage through the narrow driveway, crowding the neighborhood streets. This plan is also located on a corner where such roadside parking can be hazardous to those cars making turns. Thank you for considering my concerns. Regards, Simon Xiong, and he is at 6808 South, 300 East in Midvale, Utah. And then the next public comment is from Leroy Cole. My comments for Sidwell number 22-19-328-072 and 073. I live next door to these lots and I am against changing it from 2 lots to 4 lots. At the Midvale City Planning Commission meeting Wednesday, January 13, 2021, all the comments that were read were against changing from 2 lots to 4 lots, but the Planning Commission ignored this and passed it anyway. If changed to 4 lots, there will be no driveways in front of the garages for parking. The only parking is inside the garage or on the street. There have been several accidents at this intersection with only 1 stop sign. With cars having to park in the street, it will only block more visibility to enter this intersection. This is also a route the kids walk to get to elementary school on 300 East. So please don't change this to 4 lots. I know it is more profit for the builder, but he doesn't have to live with it. We do. Thanks. Leroy Cole, 6768 South, 300 East. Then the last comment is from Tyler Andrus. My name is Tyler Andrus. I reside at 284 East, 6790 South, directly across the street from the proposed subdivision. I do welcome development, as the empty lot right now is nothing nice to look at. I was happy to learn that the designs for houses are one-story ramblers, in keeping with the general style of houses on our street. I am, however, concerned about the design of having the two twin gives crammed in and facing each other. Such a design will look very tacky and out of place against a street of houses that face the street and pride themselves with large green front yards and great curb appeal. Around the corner from our house, the stretch of 300 East from our street to 7200 South, unfortunately has become a mismatched hodgepodge of houses and duplexes, old and new, crammed wherever they can fit them. Again, I fear that this proposed subdivision will look quite tacky and much too obvious that much of the intent here was just to cram in as many units as possible, all without consideration for the aesthetics and continuity with the rest of the neighborhood. Thanks, Tyler. And I just want to double check my emails, Mayor, to make sure I haven't received any public comments in addition to those in the past minute, and I have not. So those are all the public comments, Mayor.
I have not received anything either. This is Jason.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jason.
Jason, is street lighting addressed in this plan? Because I will note that at the intersection, it is extremely dark at night at the intersection, which could be the root of some of the previous problems with accidents there. There's one street light a little bit down, but there's nothing immediately at that intersection.
Yeah, I was there in the day and I don't live in this neighborhood. I didn't think to look. Brandon, do you know, since you did the utilities?
I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, I'm assuming within the community that there will be some lighting within.
Well, there is on the streets. They're not required to put in a power pole with lighting here. I imagine there's street lighting regularly throughout these neighborhoods, but I don't know if there is at this particular corner.
Well, there isn't. So, I guess that's a different concern.
That's the city's responsibility in this area. Having said that, it is a heck of a lot better than it was a few years ago when there was absolutely no street lighting anywhere in this whole area. Midvale put in a lot of street lights. It doesn't mean that we can't put in another one, but it is much better than it used to be. I've been in that area, actually got in a car accident one night driving out of a driveway and hitting a car directly behind me because I couldn't see it. So when we put in the LED lighting, we did light up this area, not as close as we would have liked, but it improved it considerably.
And I would think just naturally having 4 units here, even if there's no requirement to put in any lighting, it should. I'm no expert on illumination, but having 4 buildings here should illuminate that area a bit better.
I just checked Google Maps. There's street lights all the way around this property. And they may be out, but there's street lights on both sides of it. We can check that. That's a possibility that one of them's out. There's one directly to the south of it and directly to the east of it across the street. One on 6790 and one on 3rd East.
We've received the public comments. Are there any more comments from the council? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor,
I motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
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 Are there
Yes.
any opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed on this item. Now, there's an action on this. Would there be a proposal?
Mayor, I think we all have a little hesitancy on this one, but I will say, I will make the motion, but I will say beforehand that I do sympathize with the residents of this area. You know, sometimes you look at a vacant lot and you know, putting something there sounds great, and I think something should go here, and this probably is what's going to go here, and I think it will be an improvement, but I do think it'll also place some burden on the immediate surrounding neighborhood, neighbors, I should say. But hopefully the parking concerns, we can monitor that as a city, and where there are violations, and we can certainly help with that. That said, I move that we approve the 4-lot preliminary subdivision plat at 287 and 293 East, 6790 South with the following conditions of approval. 1, the applicant shall prepare a final subdivision plat to be reviewed and approved by the city engineer, fire marshal, and city council. 2, a note shall be added that a twin home residential structure with a common wall is required to be constructed along the center line, dividing lots 1 and 2 and lots 3 and 4, unless the subdivision plat is officially amended. 3, a minimum of 2 street trees are required on both lot 1 and lot 4 along 6790 South. A minimum of 4 street trees are required along 300 East. These trees shall be planted or guaranteed by a cash bond prior to issuance of certificates of occupancy for the units on lots 1 and 4. A note indicating this requirement shall be included on the final subdivision plat. 4, the applicant shall obtain a duty to serve letter for water prior to the approval of the final subdivision plat.
I have a question for Jason real quick.
Go ahead.
If we want that extra parking, can we make that a condition, or can we not do that at this stage?
The applicant meets zoning requirements, so you couldn't force him to do it, but certainly if he's willing to do that based on public comment, he certainly can do that, and we'll take that change.
I think you're muted, Brandon.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm definitely not opposed to working out a scenario where we could add a little parking in that. Like I was asking Jason, is it possible to add 2 parking stalls in the front off the 6790 and that 30-foot setback?
Yeah, I think it's doable. We can bump that out a bit, and we'll see how. I haven't dealt with that specifically, but I know that the driveway can be widened interior to the sidewalk. So
okay.
I'll get with you on the side. So if he's willing to do that.
I hope the council is recognizing, doing a Rambler Craftsman style. I believe the architecture, meets or is greater than the aesthetics in the neighborhood. And I feel like I really tried to accommodate the neighbors and really been sympathetic to the needs of that neighborhood.
We've certainly seen developers who haven't been as agreeable. So speaking for myself, we do appreciate that.
Lisa, I saw your camera go on. Did you want to make a comment from legal?
No, I mean, Jason answered it perfectly, so.
Okay. I'll second the motion.
All right. We now have a motion with a second. Now's your chance, council, if you want to comment on the motion. So now.
I do want to make another comment because there were some of the public comments where, and it's not the first time we've heard these, where people say that they make their comments and then either the planning commission or the council just ignore them and do what we want, you know, quote unquote. And I want people to understand that it's not that we just ignore your comments, but some of the questions where we're asking about, does it fit in within the zoning? Because state law requires us that if the project fits the zoning, then we're required to approve things. So it's not that we don't hear you, it's just that the law doesn't allow us to deny it. So that's my comment.
And then to piggyback on that, then we learn from it. We recognize that the zoning is terrible, and so we go and make adjustments. So for the next applicant, you know, as long as an application has not been submitted, you know, it goes forward, but we can't retroactively apply rules to property. You know, it seems pretty common sense that this is not really that great parking wise. And so I think when you make zoning, we just hope that people that make things, you know, use that, but for whatever reason, it doesn't always transpire. So we'll make an adjustment. I'm sure it'll not be perfect in the future. We'll find another hole that we have to fix, but that's just how we have to operate as a city.
Any final comments? Hey, Rory, would you ask the questions, please?
Yes, Councilmember Sperry.
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
No.
and Gettle.
Yes.
Motion
Okay,
passed.
that motion passes. Thank you for all of the input and conversation. We'll now move to the consent agenda to consider the February 2nd, 2021. I'll entertain a motion on that.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any questions or comments on the motion? Rory, would you ask the question?
Yes, Councilmember Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
and Sperry.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll now move to our first of three action items. The first one is to consider approval of resolution number 2020 R07, adopting and approving the Midvale City Emergency Operations Plan. Julie, we had you before us 2 weeks ago and you're back. So what have you got?
Yes, I am, Mayor. I'm back. And very quick overview. A month and a half ago, presented the emergency operations plan. Came back last council meeting to perhaps adopt the emergency operations plan. And there was a question to the wording of one of the paragraphs. And so the adoption was tabled and pulled together some new wording that ensured it not only complied with the state, but with the Midvale Municipal Code. So the new wording includes the fact that says the mayor acting within the role of the officer may proclaim an emergency to expedite access to local resources needed for incident response. And this is the new part, if time allows, the mayor should coordinate declarations with the city council per Midvale Municipal Code 2.16.410.k and 2.12.050, which these sections state that it's the mayor's duty to represent the will of the council, and the council expresses its will by ordinance, resolution, declaration, budget approval, and other written statements of policy and concern. So that rolled council member Gettle's suggestion into what the state said, because the chief executive officer is the one who needs to make the declaration, but this also states that that the mayor, who is the chief executive officer, is there to ensure that he carries out the will of the council. So that was the what we came up with to answer the concern. It actually made the paragraph much better, and I appreciate the concern that was expressed. And then a little bit more different wording because it was unclear in the other paragraph, is about the emergency declaration is not required to implement the actions identified in the emergency operations plan. The actions can be implemented without activating the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center, or declaring an emergency. Plan action implemented may be initiated by the mayor pro tem, city manager, or the assistant city manager. So that also clarified some of the questions that Council Member Gettle had, and I do appreciate that he said this just doesn't make a lot of sense. So it made the whole paragraph better. Are there any questions now?
I think you did a great job incorporating all of those. So thank you. Sorry to be nitpicky as I was in our last council meeting. I didn't mean to suggest, there was anything lacking substantively in the, I'm sure we would have been well served if we would have passed it as written. But I think with our form of government being what it is, a little bit different than basically any other city in Utah, we have one of the more unique forms of government that this satisfies our needs a little bit better.
No, it made, like I said, it made it better. It made it a better paragraph, made it more comprehensive and understandable. And so my recommendation, if there are no questions about any other part of the emergency operations plan, it would be the staff's recommendation to adopt the Midvale Emergency Operations Plan.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Hugh. Any questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion then.
Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 2021 R07, adopting the Midvale City Emergency Operations Plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this. Any questions on the motion? Rory, would you ask the questions, please?
Yes, Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Brown.
Yeah. Yes.
Gettle.
Yes.
Barry.
Aye.
And Glover.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next action item is to consider resolution number 2021 R08, a resolution approving the mayor to transfer any and all ownership and otherwise disposing of Midvale City's portion of certain real property known as the River Bottom Trunk Line South Valley Water Reclamation Facility. Glenn, are you up on this one?
I am. Good evening, Mayor, Council. You can hear me and see my screen, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, so this is to continue our discussion and take action on the trunk line in the river bottoms. Quick background again. In the early 70s, up through the 90s, there was a sewer trunk line installed from 90th South to approximately 7300 South to where the treatment plant is located. Ownership of that line is shared in varying degrees, and due to that, some maintenance was neglected over the years. The pipe is in condition now where it needs some work, and so the South Valley Board was presented some option how to best handle that. The board opted to transfer ownership from entities involved to the treatment plant so that there would be one point over it as far as maintenance, and then to segregate the ownership percentages or the fees, the financial liabilities based off flow and load rather than the ownership percentages that were agreed to in 1989. As far as a fiscal responsibility or a fiscal impact to the city, this will decrease our liability from 1% to 0.09%, so about tenfold. And moving forward, any financial liability will be based on actual flows, and it's anticipated that Midvale's portion will not increase and possibly decrease. Staff's recommendation is to move forward with this. Are there any questions up to this point? And I forgot, I need to apologize for all the amended packets that went out. I initially provided the wrong resolution. Luckily, we have a good legal team. Garrett caught it, and then I caught another mistake. So that's why that took place. But it is all accurate at this point.
Thank you, Glenn. Are there any questions for Glenn on this resolution? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion, please.
Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 2021 R08, approving the mayor to transfer any and all ownership and otherwise disposing of Midvale City's portion of certain real property known as the River Bottom Trunk Line to South Valley Water Reclamation Facility.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions before we call for the vote? Rory, would you call for the vote?
Yes, Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Gettle,
Yes.
Harry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
and Robinson.
Aye.
Thank you. Our final action item tonight is to consider resolution number 2021 R09, resolution modifying the Midvale City fee schedule to incorporate the building fee schedule, or permit schedule, excuse me. Nate?
Yeah, so this is just a quick change or a quick correction. In February of last year, the schedule was adopted to include the full building permit fee schedule, which is what's typically shown. In doing that, we've now noticed that there was a high, at the very high end of that table, there was a bracket that was included there. But basically between $1 million and $5 million, that bracket is not part of the International Building Code schedule and should not have been included. And so this removes that line or that bracket within the fee schedule and makes it match the International Building Code, which was the intent and is still the intent for the fee schedule. That is all.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Nate on this resolution? All right, I'll entertain a motion. Rory, would you call the questions?
Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 2021 R09, adopting a modified fee schedule for Midvale City.
Thank you.
Second.
Now we have a motion and a second. Now, any comments or questions on the motion? Now, Rory, would you ask?
Yes. Yes, Councilmember Gettle,
Yes.
Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
and Brown.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to adjourn us for a moment?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we'll adjourn and get back together in just a few minutes or seconds with the RDA packet.
Right. And Noah, do you want to let me know when you're ready? I hope you can hear me.
Go ahead, Rory.
Oh, we're good? Okay, then let's go.
We're fast.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to welcome everybody to the Redevelopment Agency of Midvale City on this February 16th. Again, this is a meeting that will be electronic without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207 as amended by House Bill 5002. I, Mayor Robert Hale, as Chair of the Midvale City Council, hereby make the determination that conducting the meeting with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase. As restrictions take place across the state for limiting public gatherings, the city wants to make sure everyone interested in participating in city council meetings can do so. The meeting will be broadcast on a YouTube link. Public comments are read into the record by city staff during public comments and public hearings portions of the meeting. If you would like to make a comment, public comment, please send an email to Laura Magnus at lmagness@midvale.com. If you'd like to provide public comments, please email your comments to Laura prior to the completion of the public comments portion of the meeting. You may also submit comments if the mayor and city council open a specific agenda item to public comment. These comments will be read aloud in the meeting and will be part of the public record. So I want to welcome everybody and call Rory to give us the roll call and see board members are here.
Okay, board member Sperry.
I am here.
Gettle.
Here.
Brown.
Present.
Robinson.
Here.
And Glover.
Here.
All right. The very first part now is public comments. So any person wishing to comment on any item not otherwise scheduled for a public hearing on the agenda may submit their comment via email to Laura Magnus prior to the completion of this portion, and they better hurry. Items brought forward to the attention of the board will be turned over to staff to provide a response outside of the meeting. Laura, are there any public comments at this point?
No, Mayor, there are no public comments at this time.
Thank you. We'll move then to the consent agenda to consider approval of the February 2nd, 2021 minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I motion we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this consent agenda. Any comments or questions on the motion? Rory, would you call the votes, please?
Yes, board member Brown.
Yes.
Gettle.
Yes.
Glover.
Aye.
Sperry.
Aye.
And Robinson.
Aye.
Thank you. We have one action item tonight to consider the resolution number 2021-02 RDA adopting the interlocal cooperation agreement between Canyon School District, known as the district, and the agency concerning the Main Street Community Development Area, Main Street CDA. Cody, can you help us through this, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Hale. Yeah, we're really excited. This is our end of the interlocal cooperation agreement. 2 weeks ago, Canyon School District had their third reading or kind of hearing for the Main Street Community Development Area. And after that third reading, they moved to an action item and moved to adopt and approved and entered into the interlocal agreement between the redevelopment agency and the district. And now the interlocal agreement is now on it's in our court, and now it's our opportunity to consider and vote on entering into these interlocal agreements. It's much the same as the cities and also UFSA's, Unified Fire Service Areas agreement. They have agreed to contributing 60% of their property tax increment for 20 years for the Main Street area. And they also have agreed to both budgets, the primary budget, which is just focusing on Main Street, as well as the contingency budget, which also includes the potential large office building should one come to fruition. And there are some additional changes to the agreement that were requested for by board members, additional transparency, that we send reports, that we should verify that we are spending the affordable housing revenues that have been raised, that we're spending those within the Main Street CDA area. And also if after negotiating with Salt Lake County, if the county does not enter into a 60% 20-year agreement like the city and the fire district and the school district, then the school district will have the opportunity to meet with us again and potentially renegotiate terms. And so that makes negotiating with the county all the more fun because there's more on the line. But those are the substantive changes to the agreement. Other than that, it is the same as the city's agreement with the agency.
Thank you, Cody. Any questions for Cody on this agreement with Canyon School District being finalized?
I don't have a question, Mayor, but I do want to say just to the other council members who weren't present, the mayor and I were participants in one of the first readings of this proposal to the Canyon School District. The mayor and I, we provided the fluffy, fun material while Cody and Nate provided the beef of the proposal, and they did an excellent job. The mayor and I were, as I said, kind of the fluffy material, but you could tell that the board was impressed by their presentation, and just wanted to let you, not council members, board members know that they definitely represented us in a way that was very beneficial. You know, if someone would have gone in with this proposal and not been able to answer the questions, they had difficult questions too. At first, I was thinking like, wow, they're really not going to go for this. But Cody and Nate had answers, very detailed answers to their difficult questions. I think that really swayed a couple of the board members. So great job.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions on this resolution? Or for Cody? If not, I'll entertain a motion, please.
Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 2021-03 RDA, which enters the agency into the interlocal cooperation agreement between Canyon School District for the participation of property tax increment to support the Main Street community development area.
Second.
I have 02. Is it 03? Rory?
It should be 03.
Okay. 03 it is. Any second on that?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any questions or comments on the motion? Rory, would you call the vote, please?
Yes, board member Glover,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
and Gettle.
Yes.
Thank you. Kane, I've seen lots of emails going back and forth, messages before we close the meeting. What's going to happen tomorrow?
So the city offices will be closed until noon. However, the court has scheduled court cases tomorrow. So they will be there at 9 o'clock, their staff. Public Works crews will be working as assigned. We anticipate that by afternoon we'll be back up to full staffing at the City Hall.
All right. We got a winter storm warning coming in tonight, so folks, don't venture out if you don't have to venture out before tomorrow. Just hope and pray you'll all drive carefully.
And don't park where you can't park, or the chief will be out personally.
Absolutely.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.